for resilience, and more importantly, to position our continent for global competitiveness in decades to come. These two examples that I've just mentioned, the auto sector, the pharmaceutical sector, are some of the very important priority value chains that I believe we have to focus on to drive industrialization on the continent. There is, of course, the immediate challenge of post-COVID-19 economic recovery that Africa has to return to the growth trajectory that we were on before the onset of the pandemic in 2019. We all know that in 2019, of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 6 were in Africa. And so as the rest of the world, mainly the developed world, has granted itself cumulatively in excess of $20 trillion in stimulus packages to stabilize their economies against the wreckage caused by the pandemic. Of course, very few African countries have the monetary policy space, nor the fiscal policy space to provide such significant stimulus packages to re-ingest growth and dynamism in their economies. So what does Africa do? In our context, I believe we have to look at other tools. That is why aggressive implementation of the AFCFTA is Africa and has to be Africa's stimulus package, such that boosting intra-Africa trade becomes the driver of Africa's economic recovery year on year, whether in the area of trade in services, digital trade, or merchandise trade. Through the establishment of continental value chains and continental supply chain networks facilitated by rules of the AFCFTA, Africa certainly does have the capacity to have an economy that is characterized by resilience, to enable the continent to withstand future crises and external shocks. Trade agreements are not about the past. Trade agreements are about the future. That is why we have to focus on young Africans to ensure that they competitively engage in cross-border trade in goods and services within the framework of the AFCFTA, and we have to provide them with the tools that they require to access new markets across the African continent. That is why, once again, the partnership with Afreximbank, as well as African Development Bank and our other development finance institutions on the continent, is critical to deploying tools that are required to help young Africans to be part of the story of the AFCFTA. In this regard, we're developing the protocol on women and youth in trade to place women and young people at the center of benefits of the AFCFTA. We believe that we have to move beyond aspirations about the importance of shared benefits, about the importance of having young people and small medium enterprises that are led by women, move beyond the aspirations that they have to be at the center of trade in Africa's economy. And so this protocol on women and youth in trade will enable us to take that step to codify these aspirations into legally binding obligations for all governments. And so what is it that distinguishes the AFCFTA from any other trade agreement? I believe there are a number of things. First, we have decided, we took a conscious decision that the AFCFTA must be a developmental trade agreement. That it must not be a trade agreement that is about unabated mercantilism. That's why we focus on industrial development. That is why we focus on youth and small medium enterprises. Because we know that in the context of a trade agreement that is negotiated where there are differentials in levels of economic development, differentials in export capacity and export readiness. We have to do more to achieve the objective of inclusivity. So the AFCFTA is by design an asymmetrical trade agreement with a focus on development. The second reason why the AFCFTA is distinguishable is because we have introduced the tools. Again, as you would have heard this morning from President Orama, we have introduced tools that are required to give commercial effect to this trade agreement. The Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, which is very important to overcome this challenge of over-reliance on a third currency for trade in Africa, the Africa Trade Gateway, the AFCFTA Adjustment Fund, and of course, the importance of trade finance, as I've just mentioned, in the context of, in relation to small, medium enterprises and young entrepreneurs. So the question, what Professor Orama raised yesterday, the article by The Economist, it will not surprise you to hear me say that it misses the point. The point is not about immediately ensuring that goods are flowing between our borders. It is not just about boosting intra-Africa trade. The point is about equitable distribution of benefits of trade. It is about ensuring that all countries that are negotiating and state parties to the AFCFTA, that they see the benefits. So to characterize a negotiation that goes to the heart of a country's economic development, path, to characterize it as political wrangling, in my view, fundamentally misses this point of the importance of equitable distributions of trade. In the area of rules of origin for the auto sector, for example, textiles and clothing, where disagreements still remain, it is very important that the big countries in Africa, who are already on a path of industrialization, must make the space for those countries who want to enter, whether it is a pharmaceutical value chain or the automotive sector. So rules of origin and the so-called political wrangling is really not about politics. It is about economic development on the basis of equity, shared benefits, and of course, shared benefits not only across countries, but in country. So it is very important that we understand that there is no delaying of implementation because of politics. We have to make sure that the agreement that we implement has shared and equitable benefits for all countries, big and small, industrialized and less industrialized, export capacity and less export capacity. We have to make sure that we avoid the mistakes that were made in other parts of the world, where we negotiated multilateral trade agreements that were symmetrical, when in fact we were doing so in the face of glaring inequalities, development levels amongst countries, and expect the same results and expect that the big and the small countries will undertake the same obligations. That is why, in my view, multilateral trade has not progressed in the last 25 years. It is precisely because of this question, or the lack of capacity to answer this question of equitable distribution. So where do we stand in the implementation of the AFCFTA? We now have 43 countries that have ratified the agreement. Morocco being the most recent to deposit the instrument of ratification. We have established a legal framework for commercially meaningful trade to happen. The phase one protocols have been concluded. We are in the process of rolling out, operationalizing the dispute settlement protocol, which is important for enhancing investor confidence, not just foreign investor confidence, but more importantly, investor confidence of Africans who are investing in Africa. We have, for the first time, established a dispute settlement mechanism that will ensure resolution of disputes in a manner that is fair, impartial, and of course, competent. We have agreed on 88.7% rules of origin. If you think about it, before the entry into force of the AFCFTA, we trade in Africa over 4,500 products. We trade over 4,500 products using different rules of origin. If you are in West Africa, these are the rules of origins that apply. In East Africa, different. Southern Africa, different. And so when you talk to an investor, they will tell you that the lack of harmonization of local content rules or the lack of harmonization of rules of origin is a constraint to investing on the African continent. And so for the first time, we have agreed on 88.7% rules of origin, which means that you as an investor, an exporter, a trader, will know with certainty and predictability what rules apply when you export from Egypt to Malawi. This is a remarkable step given the fact that we were treating one another, exporters, traders in Africa, giving ourselves the same treatment as we do to third countries. And so we are now in the process of implementing this 88.7% rules of origin on the basis of the trading documents that have been adopted by the Council of Ministers to enable the trade to happen. I was at in Chatham House a few months ago, immediately after that article that President Orama mentioned yesterday. And they said, we don't think that Africans will do it. As a question from a journalist, we don't think that you will do it. Because we have not seen the trade flows. We want to see the trade flows. So my response was, when we started negotiating, and I happened to have been in the very first meeting of the negotiations in 2011 in Accra, when we started negotiating and concluded, you said they will never conclude. Then the agreement was moving towards signature. You said they will never sign. In March in 2018 in Kigali, the agreement was signed. Then they said it won't enter into force. The agreement entered into force in 2019. Now they are saying they won't implement it. But I was reminded yesterday that we have nothing to prove to the rest of the world except to Africans themselves. And as the head of state reminded me a week or so ago, this is Africa's second liberation. So it's not just a trade agreement. It's not just a trade instrument negotiated and crafted by people like me, trade bureaucrats. It is actually, as we have said in Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, it is a flagship project for Africa's economic development. So the implementation is not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be challenging. And of course, we know from the experience of the European Union the difficulties of implementing a trade agreement and the difficulties of market integration. We know that it is going to be an incredibly difficult endeavor to undertake. But the alternative, my view, the alternative is this. Where we do not implement this agreement in the way that we heard from the president this morning to advance integration of our continent, we shall, as Africa, forever remain in the periphery of the global economy. We shall forever be trapped in this colonial economic model where we continue to export raw materials, unprocessed, to the rest of the world. But I am encouraged because there's political will. There's certainly legal commitment from 43 countries who have ratified the agreement. And the political will is it's not naive political will. It's political will that is deeply rooted in the recognition that the determination and the resoluteness with which those who liberated our continent, from Amilcar Cabral to Rolihlahla Mandela, that those who liberated our continent did so with vigor, determination, and so we have to match that. We have to understand that standing on the shoulders of those who liberated our continent, the founding mothers and fathers of the Organization of African Unity, that we understand that we face a challenge, a somewhat different challenge to what they did. And the challenge of our time is obviously not to defeat colonialism, but the challenge of our time is economic integration of our continent, industrial development of our continent, and of course, positioning our continent for decades to come for competitiveness, global competitiveness. So those who say to me, whether it is in London or in Washington, those who say to me the Africans will not be able to do it, I don't think that they understood what President Thomas Isidore Sankara said when he said of us as Africans, we must dare to invent the future now. So the AFCFTA is not a trade agreement. It is about Africa's competitiveness in the rest of the world for decades to come. So we are indeed engaged in what President Sankara said is daring to invent the future now. Let me leave you with these positive projections, which I'm sure you are aware of. So the World Bank did a study and said where the AFCFTA is implemented, the African continent has the potential to lift 100 million people out of poverty, extreme poverty, moderate poverty, contributing over $450 billion to Africa's GDP by the year 2035, boosting intra-Africa trade by 81%, and more importantly, closing the gender salary gap, because the most immediate beneficiaries where we implement this agreement are small, medium enterprises that are led by women and young entrepreneurs. This projection of by the World Bank is of course very positive and very encouraging indeed. But it won't happen on its own, as I've noted before. We will have to make sure that it becomes a reality, not just for ourselves, but that it becomes a reality for those who said the second phase of the struggle in Africa, after we defeat colonialism, the second phase must be the economic integration of our continent, as well as job creation, industrialization, creating opportunities for young Africans so that young Africans are not buried deep in the oceans of the Mediterranean as they seek a better life in other parts of the world. So it will not surprise you to hear me say that I believe that we are on track with the implementation of the AFCFTA. You heard this morning one of the leading heads of states of our continent, expressing his vision for our continent, which is a shared vision by many, many leaders and many, many heads of states and government that I have opportunity to talk to. The partnership with Afreximbank is critical. Part of the reason why trade agreements fail is because there are no tools to support implementation. Trade finance, the payment system, the adjustment facility are the tools that will enable us to implement this agreement so that as the others are providing themselves $20 trillion worth of economic recovery stimulus packages, which we don't have, that we use the tools at our own disposal to advance our continent and to push back the frontiers of poverty. And so I'm most grateful to Afreximbank and, of course, to my senior brother, Professor Orama, for his big vision and commitment to the vision. You would have seen the work that he did for all of us when we were confronting the pandemic and all of us were scrambling for vaccines, the mobilization that he undertook on behalf of the African Union. So I want to thank all of you very much, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. You can see how much work has been done by the Secretary General, and he's not alone. He has his people at the Secretariat who are working tirelessly. Just the rules of origin to reach that level in such a short space of time. We were amazed at how quickly African nations came together to create and ratify the AFCFTA. It was a record, a global record. And now the pace at which we're getting consensus is also breaking records as well. Please, another warm round of applause for the Secretary General of the AFCFTA Secretariat there for getting us started. Thank you. And we should all really think and ask ourselves the question, what are we doing to support him? What are we doing to support the AFCFTA Secretariat? I think that's very important because you can't do it alone. You need all of us in this room to also be behind you. Now, you've softened the ground for us now, so we're going to drill down on a lot of what you've said. The subject matter was making the AFCFTA work for the Africa we want. We're going to have a panel now. By now, anybody that was with us yesterday knows the format that we have a speaker and then we have a panel. So we're going to spare you. We're not going to call you up for the panel, but we do have some excellent panelists. We also have an excellent moderator. Not me, it's going to be someone else. He is one of Kenya's foremost media personalities and also a broadcaster. His name is Charles Odiambo. Charles, please, let's get started with your panel.
Once again, Mark, thank you very much. If somebody told you when the pandemic struck the world that Africa at some point would be able to get for itself the precious vaccine, I'm sure most of us in Africa would have pointed at our heads and shaken our heads and told them, you must be dreaming, because it was so precious. President Orama said yesterday, and the words keep echoing in my ears, you can if you dare. And so, Secretary General, if Africa dares, we fully will implement this. I'm not going to discuss this. I'm going to call a panel of eminent persons to take us through this and just critically look at exactly how far are we and where are we headed. We have a destination, the Africa we want by 2063. We have a vehicle, a prolific vehicle in the AFCFTA. Now, what kind of fuel do we need? What kind of drivers do we need? And what kind of road network do we need? That's what we want to discuss. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on stage Rosa Whittaker, the President and CEO of the Whittaker Group of Companies. Dr. Amani Ashfu, President of the African Business Council. Mr. Mike Ogbalu, CEO, Pan-African Payment and Settlement Systems. And Mr. Abdul Rabiu, who is the founder and executive chairman of BUA Group, the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Welcome, sir. Now, this is going to be quite an incisive discussion. The Secretary General, Mr. Omkele Mene, His Excellency Omkele Mene has basically laid the foundation. I will start with you, Madam Rosa. By the way, Rosa Whittaker was in the thick of things when the AGOA Treaty or the AGOA Act was being put in place. Rosa, what did America see in Africa 20 years ago that led to AGOA?
Thank you very much. Well, I think 20 years ago, when we were working on AGOA, what we saw was what was not working, and that was the amount of aid that we had given to Africa. And what we saw was the very problems that we were sending the aid to correct were problems that we had helped to create. And what we saw at the emergence when the GATT became the WTO in around 1995 was that we had a trade policy with every region of the world except for Africa. And what we saw was trade opportunity, we saw promise, we saw potential. And I'll just give you one quick example. When I started thinking about AGOA, I was a career diplomat at the American Embassy in Cote d'Ivoire. And I saw that we were subsidizing giving beef to the Ivorians, and we were subsidizing and giving wheat that was described as a good thing. But I also saw how we were displacing the farmers. And I saw how you could export raw cocoa beans from Cote d'Ivoire to America at zero tariffs. But once you place value, once you added value in Cote d'Ivoire or any African countries, there would be a tariff escalation. And so that was part of the dynamic that gave birth to AGOA, because AGOA not only got rid of tariffs on essentially all products made in Africa, it also got rid of the tariff peaks and the tariff escalations.
Thank you. Now, the IMF suggests that probably the removal of non-tariff barriers could be a boost up to 4 times for trade than tariff reduction. How do you think IFTA can do this?
Well, I think that that is exactly correct. And I know the Secretary General said, trade agreements about the future, not about the past. But we have a lot to learn from the past. And what we learned is that dealing with the trade, the non-tariff barriers, by value brought more income than the actual tariff removal. So it's important to do both. So I absolutely agree, and I want to applaud. Dr. Rama and what Afreximbank is doing with the trade facilitation support, with the PAP system, with dealing with those non-tariff barriers. And also, I want to applaud the Secretary General for recognizing the importance and significance of the digital solutions, because that is where a significant amount of income is going to be generated. And that's what we've learned from NAFTA, Mercosur, and other agreements.
Quite interesting. Now, thank you very much, Mr. Ogbalu. From a private sector's perspective, we have had so much, and we'll be hearing so much from our guests. But in I think January this year, we had a very important function, the launch of the PAPS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. How far has this gone towards helping AFCFTA in the journey towards the Africa we want?
Thank you very much, and I'll segue from where Rosa stopped, where she talked about non-tariff barriers. So non-tariff barriers range across all other things except duties and taxes that affect imports and exports. Payments and the frictions around payments is one of those non-tariff barriers to trade. Today, when you initiate a payment on the African continent, 80% of payments on the continent have to travel halfway around the world before coming back to the continent. Now, we do not ship goods that way. We do not make calls that way. Why should money travel in that same direction? So what we've done with PAPS is to create um, a payment infrastructure that is able to look at all the friction areas, friction around cost, around access, around speed, around transparency, and design an infrastructure that will be able to deal with each of those friction areas. And therefore, because we know that in our daily lives, really, we create all manners of content, we create goods and services, we consume some of them, and we trade the rest to other people. So our whole lives is about exchange of value. So we trade value one to another, and the tool for that trade of value is payments. So the more we make payments efficient, the more we are able to actually remove a barrier that will accelerate trade. And that's why we have been on this journey, Afreximbank, the AUC, and the AFTA Secretariat, to creating this infrastructure. And we believe that it will open up the continent and even accelerate opportunities and accelerate trade. Thank you.
But quite honestly, we have quite a number of payment systems existing in Africa. To what extent has PAPS either disrupted or complemented the existing payment systems?
Well,
because the ultimate objective for all the payment systems is to enhance trade.
absolutely. So when you look at the concept of a market has participants, it has rules, it has an acceptable means of payment, logistics, and commodities that are traded. Now, one of the issues that we've had is that we've not had a consistent, acceptable means of payment across the 55 countries and territories. Now, what we are trying to do is not to cannibalize existing payment infrastructure. What we are trying to do is to bring about interoperability. So we have more or less started preaching the message and trying to get our partners to understand that what we need for this after to succeed, which captures all of our ambitions as a continent, is to actually be able to have an interoperable system that will guarantee that a payment starting in Cape Town to Cairo or from Dar es Salaam to Lagos is able to complete in no more than 120 seconds, okay, as against the 5 to 7 days that you have today. So we would like to cooperate and collaborate rather than trying to replace existing systems. Thank you.
This is on a light note. I am sure you're disrupting somebody's payment system outside Africa. What is that one question that keeps coming every time you introduce yourself as the CEO PAPS outside Africa? You know what I'm talking about.
Again, we try not to focus on those questions. We want to focus on the impact that we want to create on the continent. But one of those questions are, how does this affect the order of things globally? Um, but our focus is really how do we bring together the infrastructure on the continent to solve Africa's challenges. We are going into the fourth industrial revolution. We have young people, very creative and very innovative. We would like an innovative individual in a small country like Seychelles to begin to see Africa, 1.3 billion people, as his market, rather than seeing just 1 million people in Seychelles as his market. So our focus is really the impact we want to create on the continent, okay, and and how we want to impact trade on the continent.
You actually picked it out of my mind. What I intended to say, and I couldn't say because you are in my panel, is let us focus on what we can do as Africans, not what people are saying. So I think that is just right. And I'll move to you, Dr. Amani Asfour. As the private sector, what is exactly your role? What is the private sector's role as the African Business Council in this journey?
Thank you. I'm Abdul Samad. I think you got my name wrong. Oh,
sorry. I'll get to you.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
Thank you very much. Let me first congratulate Afrexim under the leadership of my brother, President Orama, for this very important conference, and also Central Bank and my brothers, sisters across the continent from the private sector. Africa Business Council is established in line with the Heads of State Decision Summit to organize the private sector of Africa, to boost our intra-Africa trade, to increase our intra-Africa trade, operationalize the ACFTA, and strengthen our Africa private sector. So our vision actually is a competitive, borderless, innovative Africa for trade, investment, and industrialization. And the inclusive membership of the Africa Business Council, making the real voice of the private sector, includes the REX Business Councils, so COMESA Business Council, SADC Business Council, or on our board, the Chambers of Commerce, the private sector federations, Union of Industries, manufacturer associations, large corporates, SMEs, women entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurs. So it makes actually the private sector voice of the continent. And through our technical committees, we have 20 technical committees under the Africa Business Council, which is for trade, for investment, energy, infrastructure, creative industries, mineral development resources, name it, SMEs, women, youth, agriculture, mineral development resources, tourism and hospitality industries, creative industries. So those technical committees are driven by private sector entities that is leading in this expert. And we have a financial committee for financial services and financial inclusion, which really talks about what my brothers talked about, how we bring the regulatory frameworks, the central banks, even the telecommunication companies, to see how a trader from Zimbabwe can trade with a trader from Egypt with their mobile and see how they do it. So the strategy of real empowerment of Africa Business Council, which speaks to the Africa we want is a prosperous, peaceful, integrated Africa, driven by the citizens of Africa to play its role in the global arena. We are the citizens of Africa. Nobody will do it for us. If we don't do it as private sector, in coordination with our governments, our financial institution, nobody will do it for us. So the triad of empowerment are based on 3 pillars. Private sector strengthening, including SMEs, women, and youth, and this will be through awareness, capacity building, training, sensitization. Second pillar is policy advocacy. What do we need from the governments actually to do for our private sector? We are advocating to have at least 40% of all government procurement goes to African private sector. We cannot allow tenders to go to outsiders while we have on the continent companies that can do it. Construction, trade services, every single product which is on the African soil should not be imported from our other outside the continent. But to do this, so in order to do this, we have the third pillar, which is about product development. We need an innovative, a competitive, a value-added, a standardized quality African, made in Africa product. So in order to do this, we have all the technical expertise, the scientific expertise on the continent. We need to see how we use our scientific research centers and link it with industrialization. We have all the minerals resources across the continent, but guess what? All those minerals go out the continent, they are refined, if it is jewelry, they are cut and polished outside the continent and come back to the continent. The agricultural product goes there, agri-processing goes there, macadamia nuts goes to Vietnam to be roasted there, and then again to our African continent. The marble goes outside in China and cut into pieces and come back. Everything. We are still, as my brother Makilimini have said, importing pharmaceuticals. Here in Egypt, there is 400 150 pharmaceutical companies that are doing 165, sorry, and we have 460 medical consumable supplies, while we are still importing from China. But there is no business linkages among us. We really don't know about ourselves. So this is real time. So as private sector, we come together and see how we manage our own resources, how we build the capacity of our business development centers, business incubators, how the financial institutions can really build and finance our trade and industry. And I really say that they are the 10 Ins: indigenous capacity building, information and communication, innovation and scientific research and technology, industrialization, infrastructure and energy, integration, intellectual property rights, protection, international markets, because if we could be the best seller of all our products to the world, but we have to come together. So this is real, the private sector role is how to integrate, how to industrialize, how to add value to our raw materials, and to how to make sure the Africa we want. The Africa we want is not about some African leaders say, we want Africa free from hunger, free from disease, free from literacy, from poverty, but we as private sector say, no, we challenge this. We don't want Africa to be free from hunger, but well-nourished. Not free from disease, but healthy. Not free from poverty, but wealthy. Not free from illiteracy, but well-educated. And we can do it as Africa. Thank you very much.
I bet you could add not free from fear, but confident. Thank you very much. Mr. Abdul Rabiu, you're actually in the private sector. I know she has mentioned a bit of what your role is in all this, but what exactly, as an insider, do you think is the role of the private sector in actualizing the movement of this vehicle towards the aspirations or the dream of Agenda 2063?
Yes, thank you. I think it is important. It has to be a collaboration between the private sector, the government, and of course the secretariat. For example, at BOA, our company, we have started already enjoying the benefits of the agreement. We have a cement plant in Sokoto State, which is about 120 kilometers from Niger Republic. And we are exporting almost 20% of our cement to Niger without any issue. So we've really started enjoying the benefits. But what I want to say is to buttress the issue or issues that His Excellency President Al-Sisi discussed this morning. That we have a lot of advantages, we have a lot of resources, but we have quite a lot of issues also for us to succeed as Africa. He talked about the issue of infrastructure. Infrastructure is a major problem, for Africa to succeed. We have to address that issue. If you look at, the issue of power, for example, Africa maybe has about 120,000 megawatts, about 120 gigawatts, and half of that is coming from South Africa and Nigeria. So we really need to address some of those issues. The issue of power, is a big problem. In some parts of Africa, it's an issue that needs to be addressed. That is one. Talked about security. Security is also very, very important, and of course, access to finance. And we can see what Egypt has done in the last 6-7 years. They've been able to, with the support of Afreximbank and Al-Sawidi, which is a local company, been able to put up almost 30,000 megawatts. So that is possible to replicate in other parts of Africa. So unless we actually address the issue of infrastructure, there is no way we can succeed with some of the projects that we are looking at. Of course, we have the issue of production. We have to try and produce what we consume. Africa is importing almost 70 to 80% of what we eat, despite the fact that we have 60% of the world's arable land. We have the water, we have the land mass, 1.4 billion people. So we really need to produce, and we also need to add value to what we produce. Again, African countries, 4 African countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, and Cameroon produce 75% of the entire cocoa in the world. 75%. Four countries in West Africa. Yet we get only 10% of the value of that, which is about $150 billion. So these are the areas that I think we need to concentrate on. We need to also ensure that we address the issue of food security. The current upheavals across the world has exposed our vulnerability. What is happening in Ukraine and Russia has shown us that we need to look inwards. We need to ensure that we are able to produce what we need. And we can do it. We have the resources, we have the people, we have what it takes, but we just need to have the will. Thank you.
Do you think the much touted climate change could be categorized as one of the challenges towards this journey?
Well, that is a very sensitive one. Climate change is real, it's here, but truth be told, I think Africa needs a bit of moratorium, if you know what I mean. Because if you look at it, Africa, we have a huge, industrialization and food security deficit. We really need to address those issues. And I don't believe it would be fair for Africa to be expected to green, at the same pace as the industrialized world. I think it will be very difficult because it is expensive, it is difficult, and we need to actually address our issues. So yes, of course, it is something that should happen, it is happening, but it should be like a transition. For us at BOA, for example, we've already started the journey. We have integrated ESG frameworks across all our businesses. At our cement plants, we have shifted largely away from coal to LNG, and we have, installed, wastewater recycling systems across all our businesses. So we have started the journey. But in general, I think, Africa needs a bit more time, maybe a bit more flexibility, because we need that.
In the interest of time, ladies and gentlemen, my distinguished panel, I will take one round on each of you, which is a general question. And the question is for the insiders, excluding Mrs. Rosa Whitaker. What is the Africa you want? And I will start with you, Mr. Rabiu.
Yes.
You are seated in your corner office. The tea you're taking has a mark of made in Africa.
Right.
The suit you're wearing is made in Africa. The furniture is made in Africa.
Yes.
The carpet is made in Africa. What are you going to do to make sure we attain this highest mark of quality?
I think it's important, and for me, I think the important thing is self-sufficiency in everything that we do. And as I keep saying, we must, as much as possible, ensure that we produce what we consume. So we need to be self-sufficient, because at the end of the day, if you are not, you need to be looking, outward. So we need to look inward. We need to do more locally. We need to develop local solutions to our local problems. That is what I think we need to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ogbalu, what is the Africa you want?
Well, I would say a prosperous Africa driven by trade between African states who are actually able to trade value-added products amongst themselves, create employment, and all this can be underpinned. Permit me, I'm trying to tie it back to what I do. And this will be underpinned by an efficient payment infrastructure. After all, life is about trading values one to another, and a trading continent is a prosperous continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Amani, I know you said earlier that you want to see an Africa that is not free from disease, but a healthy Africa. What else do you want from the Africa you want?
I want to go by train from Cairo to Cape, from Lagos to Mombasa. I want, when I eat in any restaurant, it's a food that is made in Africa. When I wear the jewelry, and this is from Madagascar, it's not cut and polished in Antwerp or in Netherlands, but here in Africa. I need pharmaceutical and vaccines that is manufactured here. I need, when I go to the rural women on the grassroots, I want personally to have a questionnaire for the cross-border women traders between Zambia and Zimbabwe, Egypt and Sudan, Ethiopia and Djibouti. I asked the women, do you know anything about, at that time I was chair for COMESA Business Council, you know anything about simplified trade regime? Nothing. Do you know anything about the COMESA? Nothing. So what I need is really, when I ask every single person on the continent, what is ACFTA, they will know that this is the CFTA is really for prosperity of Africa. I want to ask every young entrepreneur who is there about the ecosystem. Have you any difficulty for starting your business? And I really need the African leaders to realize the real partnership of private sector to implement the Africa we want. The Africa we want, as we say, it's a prosperous Africa. When the founding fathers started the Organization of African Unity in 1963, it was about political liberation. 2063 development agenda is about our economic liberation. And we have a slogan at the African Alliance for Women Empowerment, which is our heading, is about financial independence, give you the power of choice and voice. So it's time for Africa to be financially independent and have our choice and voice. This is the Africa we want.
Wow. Now that is from the insiders. Allow me now to get a final comment from the outsider who is an insider. Rosa.
Okay, I first wanted to say that according to the African Union, I'm part of the sixth region. So the Africa that I would like to see is really a united Africa. And that when I say a united Africa, I'm talking about the Africans who were born on the continent and those of us whose Africa was born in. And in the United States, when I look at the African American community, we have $1.6 trillion in consumer spending and income. When I look at the resources and the strength, the economic, cultural, and other kinds of strength of the Africans on the continent, what a powerful force that would be if we were to really unite, focused on not the things that divide us, but the many more things that unite us. And I do believe that it's doable.
I was watching a video clip where the famous Professor Jeffrey Sachs was making a comment. And he categorically stated that the G20 needs an extra seat so that we have G21. And the 21st seat should be reserved for Africa because we are looking at a 1.4 billion strong population with minds that want to be independent. In the words of Professor Orama, president of Afreximbank, I will say it again. If you dare to dream, you can achieve it. But where I come from, we say if you dream and don't wake up to act, it will remain just a dream. Ladies and gentlemen, let us wake up, dust and fold our sleeves, and get to work. Thank you very much to my very able panel, and thank you to my distinguished plenary for giving us time. I am sorry that is all we could have time for this evening. In the interest of time, Mark, take it away.
Another round of applause for an excellent panel and an excellent moderator. Thank you very much there, Charles. Now, last night someone sent me a post, I guess a tweet that was tweeted by Paul Kagame. I don't know if you've seen this tweet. Very interesting. Paul Kagame on his official Twitter page. It's really got me thinking after what we talked about yesterday, and this is a direct quote from Paul Kagame. It says, "It is unacceptable that Ukraine, a country of 44 million people, will feed Africa, a continent of 1.4 billion people. I promise all Rwandans that Rwanda will attain food self-sufficiency before 2025. I've authorized $1 billion worth of farming materials and all logistics involved in boosting up our farming industry." Remarkable, really, because you're already seeing the wheels turning in this changing world, which was so well articulated yesterday, and we're continuing with that theme now. One of the things that's been massively disrupted is the global financing environment, and we've heard a lot about that yesterday. We're going to have a panel on that shortly. And the question is, how do you financing the implementation of the AFCFTA? How do you do that in a disrupted global financing environment? Before we bring this on, let's go back. Afreximbank, the impact of Afreximbank is unparalleled in the area of intra-Africa trade financing. But it started somewhere, and it started with a pioneer president of Afreximbank, and I'm going to call on him now to articulate some of the themes that we should be focusing on as we have this panel, so which reflect experiences. Things like targeting trade finance, for example. And he's going to articulate where we should be looking, what we should be talking about. So please welcome His Excellency, Mr. Christopher Edordu.
Thank you very much. Our session is supposed to be discussing the financing of the implementation of our continental integration arrangement in an environment of disruption. Professor Rama yesterday, or is it day before yesterday, provided some kind of answer to what I will be suggesting our forthcoming panel should be looking at. He thought that we represent a fortunate generation because our leaders have given us an agreement to implement. In a situation worse than that, we will have no agreement altogether. So we do have a legacy that has been given to us. One thing occurred to me as I pondered Professor Rama's prosa. Is every legacy something you can desire to implement? Are there legacies that are problems in themselves? Especially in an environment of disruption. The target that the designers of the agreement have set is immense. And we have had all kinds of targets, both in Afreximbank strategic plans, in encouragements provided by other African leaders in other various fora. For example, the figure of 52% growth in African trade had been suggested. President Obasanjo, in an Afreximbank forum, suggested that the continent should aim to finance 50% of its trade finance requirements. What has happened over the years, even in good times, is that our achievement has hovered around somewhere between 15 and 18% financed by our entities. With the expected growth in trade and therefore expected growth in trade finance requirements. One theme I would suggest experts examine is whether we are going to be able to break the 16 to 18% trade finance achievements we have recorded over the past 25 to 30 years, even in good times. The second theme I would like to suggest that a group look at, a panel look at, is the design of trade finance institutions. When Afreximbank was being designed, the thinking was that trade finance meant essentially short-term trade finance. It was a great battle, both here in Egypt, in Cairo, and in Southern Africa, when efforts were made to broaden our understanding of what is supposed to be trade finance. And therefore, the areas of intervention in this issue we were trying to design. You will notice that much of what Afreximbank has achieved in the last few years has been in the areas that were supposed to be marginal to the mandate of the organization. For example, when the issue of payments was discussed, at the time Afreximbank was being designed, it looked like something marginal to what was required as a mandate of the organization. But what has happened is that some of the most momentous achievements of Afreximbank have concerned the areas that were not thought to be important at the time it was being created. The UN ECA suggests that much of African trade is carried by road, especially internal trade. What does that suggest about the role of an entity like Afreximbank or other entities associated with trade finance in our continent? Should they be involved in trying to do trade facilitating infrastructure? I think they should. Much of the obstacle that trade and trade finance confronts today concerns limitations in infrastructure that drive trade. Does that mean we should look at our organizational design again? I have tried to encourage Afreximbank to consider such a redesign. Professor Rama, who is usually an extremely optimistic person, have a reluctance to lead the process. If, as many have suggested, we require to industrialize our exports, then you require certain inputs that should enter into export production. For example, power, aspects of logistics. Afreximbank has had to undertake a strained interpretation of its mandate in order to do those things that now turn out to be extremely important for industrializing our exports. I would like to suggest that our panel ponder the possibility of a cooperative, collaborative redesign of our trade finance infrastructure. At the time this design was being done, like every journey, you cannot anticipate everything. Now we have experienced trying to implement a continental trade finance infrastructure. And we know a little better than we knew at the time this current infrastructure for trade financing was conceived. Every system, I believe, as its experience unfolds, tries to consider what next has to be done to reinforce its original format. I would therefore suggest that our panel reflect on whether we need a redesign, a modification of our trade finance infrastructure in the light of the experience we have had in recent times. Two more points. When we started operating our current African trade finance infrastructure, we defined our world as essentially representing what is generally regarded as the West, because most of the mobilizing resources we have come from Western banks. Then, my friend John Luekra, our second president, took us to China. I think that was 2012. Some thought it was a fairly strained, rather excessively bold move to go in that direction. While we were still trying to catch our breath, Professor Rama took us, I think 2019, to Moscow. And for us, we thought now that our trade finance world had approximated, or was approximating the real world. But look at what has happened after 2019. COVID-19 came. Then, look at what has happened recently. How would anybody operating this state of affairs manage the institutions to be encountered? I think it was Dr. Yeria, the governor of the Central Bank of Zambia, who was talking about how he felt a sense of ambivalence sitting between Russian and Chinese banks and Western banks, and wondering what to say in between them. As I read, even mere money transfers, we say mere, but sometimes it can be so fundamental because you need to be paid if you finance trade. And you also need to pay for goods where you buy them. Nobody takes a second look at SWIFT when operating trade finance. Invariably, something like intermediate staff handle such kinds of operations because they are not deep policy questions. But now it has become an issue. If you are torn between, as the governor of the Central Bank of Zambia was, if you were sitting in Afreximbank and other trade finance entities dealing with Western banks and dealing with non-Western banks, how should we be managing such a relationship? That would be the third issue I would suggest that we look at. There are institutions to be created because it's not only infrastructure that is created. For example, the payment system that has been created is part of the trade finance infrastructure. There are several others that need to be set up. Some of them are to be set up by private entities, and others by the authorities. Invariably, the authorities create a framework for such institutions to be created. For example, the authorities set up a framework for export trading companies. How will these institutions operate in order to encourage trade finance on a scale now required by our new continental agreement? I suggest these themes not to bind the panel. I was told to suggest these themes, but that the panel should feel free to go beyond this suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the pioneer president of the African Export-Import Bank for setting the scene there, His Excellency Mr. Christopher Dordu. Give him one more round of applause, please. Now, the panel has to tackle the tricky situation of how do we finance the implementation of the AFCFTA in this disrupted global financing environment. We have an excellent moderator. We used to see him a lot on the moderating scene. He was a very articulate person with many hats, speaks many languages. I understand you speak Mandarin, I think French, English, some Portuguese. He's a man of many talents, but now he's the UN Assistant Secretary General and Director General of the African Risk Capacity Group. But today, he's the chair of this panel. Please welcome Ibrahima Chiek Diong.
Whenever you have to moderate a panel, I will highly recommend you ask Mark to introduce you because he always says nice things about me. Whenever he asks me to do this role, I am delighted to be here. My role is going to be extremely easy because His Excellency, the Secretary General of our Continental Free Trade has made it easier by making the case about the merit, the potential, the opportunities offered by our Continental Free Trade Agreement. What we have to do now, it has to be financed, so it becomes a reality, and that's why this panel is extremely important. I recall in looking at the Afreximbank literature, they have estimated it requires about $82 billion active trade deficit when it comes to finance for us to actually meet some of our trade financing needs across the continent. So lots of money that need to be filled from different sources, public sector and private sector as well. It is important we join our forces not only within the continent but also outside the continent to meet that funding needs. We've heard about the opportunities, the benefits and the merits. In order to actually tap into those opportunities, it requires the political commitment. We have it. The Secretary General has made the case. It requires funding, public and private sector, but more importantly, it requires lots of incentives so we can get the private sector to come in and invest and help us meet the funding needs for our continental instrument. You do not have to listen to me because we have an excellent panel coming to join me on stage. And we're trying to cover different angles of financing this extremely important continental instrument so we can begin to see the benefit across our continent. I am delighted to call on stage His Excellency Engineer Hani Salem Sonbol, the CEO of International Islamic Trade, Finance and Corporation. Give him a big round of applause. If he managed to get the technology right, we may also have online His Excellency Adma Sutadese, the President and Group MD of the Trade and Development Bank, who may be calling from Kenya at some point to join us and bring his contribution from the perspective of his bank. I'd also like to call upon Mr. Dante Capioni, Managing Director and CEO of Afreximbank from the Arab Republic of Egypt. Mr. Dante Capioni, if you can join us, give him a round of applause as well. We do have Mr. Tamer Mosalam, which is CEO and board member of the MISR Investment and Export Development Company from Egypt as well, to join us on stage. Give him a round of applause. And last but not least, Mr. Farouk Gumel, who is the Group Executive Director of TGI Group and Chairman of Union Bank. Mr. Farouk, if you can join us on stage as well. All right, over the next couple of minutes, we're going to try to cover different grounds, looking at opportunities, incentive, looking at funding, public and private sector, to understand what they bring to the table so we can actually meet the funding needs for our continental free trade. I'm going to start with Engineer Ani, looking at your institution, looking at the opportunity on the African continent. I wonder from what you heard so far, if you could just walk us through where do you see not only the challenges, the opportunity, but what does your bank bring to the table in helping us meet the financing need I talked about earlier? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for really the Afreximbank for inviting me to be really with you among this August gathering today, and with also this very August panelist. In fact, as if we talk about the about the importance of this subject, it really came very timely, and I think now we see the ITFC, a part of the IDB group, actually is very specialized in an area. It's going to be also needed for the CFTA to be implemented and to get the potentials of the this very important trade agreement, which will definitely create the largest free trade area in the world, I guess. Talking about not only serving 1.3 billion, but also we understand the importance of this for the growth in Africa and the importance of trade in really supporting the African economies. This will definitely have an implication. This since the beginning of the idea, we were following very closely, and we were also convinced that our role as an institution to really pave the way for the African continent, of course, in close partnership with our partners like the Afreximbank, like Badia, is that we are needed actually to facilitate the way member countries can really benefit from this very important, I would say, agreement. Not we in the beginning when we felt that the CFTA and of course our findings from what we do researches on the importance of this agreement. We know that this will definitely, not only, as I said, change the face of Africa, but also it will be a game changer for Africa. And that's, you know, if we talk about roughly figures, about talking about 30 billion out of poverty in Africa, and also talking about how really the African income can be increased to almost 450 billion by 2035. And this is very, very important to realize. We know that as a specialized in trade, we know that we also increasing the exports in Africa, which is one of the main objectives of actually having this free trade, is really to be able to trade with neighbors, with the rest of the African continent freely, is that the African export will increase to about 560 billion by that time. Of course, there are many areas that will be boosted through this very important, when we realized actually in ITFC that liberalization actually in Africa is very important, not only important for the growth, but also important to really have this enhancing the intra-African trade. The percentages, everybody agrees with me, the percentages are quite very unacceptable to see the Central African percentage of trade with all these great potentials, is available for Africa. Africa is the continent of potentials, a continent full of fortunes. And yet we see that it is really has so many challenges, cross-border challenges, we have tariffs challenges, we have, cost of doing trade is a challenge by itself in Africa. And that's why this agreement will definitely bring good, I would say, good results. The issue of having liberalization in Africa definitely will not come so easy. You need roads, you need to have the right infrastructure like what we have heard this morning from His Excellency, the President of Egypt, talking about the need to have infrastructure in Africa. Of course, we are seeing that the logistics are also very important. Now, as ITFC is also working with many African countries for what we call trade logistical platforms, very important to really have the services ready. Of course, the rest of what we need in development is needed energy, and we need, of course, the other digital infrastructure now as well. I think all what we see, if you agree with me, all what we see will need funding. And definitely funding is very, very important really to be provided for this very important agreement. So some say, I'm not saying, I cannot quote this, is that we need almost 1,000 billion, to continue to really gain the fruits of this very important agreement. And I think that will not only include institutions like ITFC or IDB, but it will have to really have this public-private, I would say, partnership to be able also to get involved. Private funds, financial institutions, everyone has to play its role really in doing what is really needed. So it requires a lot of financing. Shall I continue the...
Well, let me actually push a little bit, because I think it's really important we'll get into. You're looking at an opportunity, if fully implemented, will get to 1 billion people over a market for the African continent. You're looking at it from your perspective as a bank. What are some of the incentives you would like to see so you can actually increase your investment and trade finance flows to Africa, so we can actually meet our funding gap? But this is about financing this very ambitious plan. We need to know where the funding is going to come from.
Well, as I said, funding, this is very very clear, that it is either coming from public financing, private, public, multilateral development institutions like us. We also have the funds that already were actually very successful in attracting funds even before the COVID crisis and the geopolitical crisis that we are seeing. The implementation, what I wanted to say is the implementation of this agreement has to really get involved to understand that it is going to bear cost on the private and on the public. And the private side, you see that the private side is going to be having more of a structural cost that is really that is needed. And from the public side, of course, what I mean by structural cost is that cost of really doing also some skilling and some reskilling, some replacement of maybe capital, goods and so on. But from the public side, we know that many countries think, and that's why some countries fear the ratification, is that they are really going to lose part of their tariff revenues. And this is, of course, needs adjustment programs. These adjustment programs is actually what we do now with our partners to support the CFTA Secretariat, and we do it also with the Afreximbank and BADIA and other institutions. For that, I think it's the potentials are great for institutions like us, for others to be part of this. We already started actually, and we have, of course, very close partnership with the Secretariat, and His Excellency, the General Secretary of the agreement, is now we are building so many programs for many member countries, and mainly focusing on how to readjust and make countries ready really for the agreement. Today we've had a very important projects with what is called with Her Excellency Vera Songo, the UNICA. We have almost like 29 projects already in place to really do the national strategies, or they call it the national competitiveness strategies for Africa, and that's quite impressive. And we are really looking for more, to do more with the rest of the. We are very close with the African Union, and also we are doing a lot of programs with them. And we are doing also our own normal work in Africa. We financed 65 billion US dollar since inceptions in 2008, and I think now we are almost like 29 billion US dollar just for Africa. And that is, of course, shows how important is Africa. We are leading how to finance it. We have two important programs. One of them is the most important for Africa and for the CFTA to be implemented, which is the Arab-Africa Trade Bridge. This is a multi-donor, multi-stakeholders, and multi-partners. We focus on, of course, trade, investment, infrastructure, and insurance, and I hope this will support really the financing of the needs of the African continent.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Engineer Aini. We're going to move away from trade finance to another component equally important, and that is financing African SMEs, the youth and the women. And Mr. Caponi, that's where you come in, looking at this opportunity in the continent whereby 80% of the jobs actually are created by the SMEs in Africa. So what do you think we need to do in terms of actually increasing access to finance so they could actually be part of the solutions when it comes to our continent free trade? Mr. Capioni.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank as well the opportunity given by Afrexim and by the Central Bank for inviting me in this panel. As you said, I am the Managing Director CEO of Afreximbank, and we belong to an Italian group, Intesa Sanpaolo Group, and we are the result of the privatization of a public bank in 2006. And in this sense, we have inherited also the network of this bank, public bank. And our wish as a group is to be an impact bank. So we have to serve the need of the country, and we have to use the network that we have. And as you said, being the SMEs, the backbone of many economies, including Egypt, for us is natural to revert to MSMEs. MSMEs is a quite wide range of companies. Micro, that is regulated in Egypt through the specific law, and medium, small and medium, that reach let's say a size of a turnover of about 10 million euro. You know, this is a size that can vary country by country. In Europe, SMEs is even a company that has a turnover up to 50 million euros. So we are talking about different situation. The peculiarity of this segment is that is variegated. So we need to develop differentiated strategies, because here what is important is to listen the customer need. And the needs of the micro companies are different than from the needs of medium enterprises. In the microfinance, for example, what is very important is the protection. Customer protection is important to accompany our product with financial literacy courses. And there are products that can be withdrawn from us only after the borrower has gone through of course, not very complex, but at least to understand the logic of the financing. It's important in the microfinance to work on the territories, to work with the private sector or governmental organizations that are supporting programs, and we are there to follow this, supporting this program. For example, in the agriculture, we have a program that is supporting the World Food Program attempt to favor the consolidation of the land. So in this case, it's important to be there with a product that really needs. We study the cycle of the product, and we provide products that are, let's say, linked to the actual cycle of the product. We don't do microfinance 12 months, 12 installment. We have even product with 6 months grace period up to 3 years, because we know the cycle of what we have to finance. So, first of all, this is what we do, and I think it's the proper way to follow and to support the microfinance. As per the medium and small enterprises, of course, we are going towards more structured companies. Also here, it's anyway important to serve with the proper product. Is important in this case also to support capacity building, and also here we have also financing that are supported by technical assistance provided by multilateral organizations that are very important to support the sector. It's important to support the company alongside the life of the company, the development of the company. We have agreements with private equity funds to step in the moment the company is ready to leap and has now the capability to have their own sources. So also this can become also clear to the entrepreneur in the moment is well educated in financial terms. So this is extremely important. Of course, it's important to have also an environment that is quite receptive, and basically here we have to work on two sides, from the offer side that I mentioned now, but also on the demand side, because for sure the fiscal policy.
We'll come back to that in the follow-up question. And I think you're putting an extra pressure for the next speakers to keep it a bit shorter so he can ask more questions and get some feedback from the audience. If I may come back to you on your question about the environment. Mr. Tomé, if you recall, the purpose of this conversation is that there's life before the pandemic and after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, and then the war. So my question to you, looking at the world that we live in today, completely disrupted, what do we need to do differently in terms of innovation so we can actually mobilize the funding that we need to actually support our content and free trade with the tremendous opportunity that's been talked about? What kind of innovation do you see in terms of investment flow and FDI to Africa so we can meet the funding needs?
Thank you very much. I think let me take one step back, because we started the day that we talk about the interruption, what what was the case before the COVID, what is the case after COVID, and then the war, the Russian, the Ukrainian conflict. I think that we have to live with unpredictable circumstances. That's something that has to be built in our DNA. Make sure that it's part of our thinking to come. Even raise the new generation on the fact that they have to make sure that they, to your point, innovate, make sure that they have alternative, and there is more sophistication when it comes to even not only thinking about finance, but also thinking about how you run your business, build your economy, and have that diversity coming in a good way. So if we take two steps back and we talk about trade financing, because I would turn that a little bit to financing at large and zoom a little bit on the infrastructure, because I believe that infrastructure, which has been mentioned several times, started yesterday and today, has a two lens. One lens is the infrastructure that you will put in place to encourage the investments and the inflows coming to your country. So that one big lens, which basically will entail everyone to think about industrial zone, industrial parks, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of regulations that you will put in place in order to encourage FDIs to come to certain verticals, certain industries, and it should not be separated from a vision of a continent or a vision of a country, because there is a lot to be done, not only in agriculture, there is a lot to do in metal industries, there is a lot to do in pharmaceutical, as we rightly said, the previous panel have mentioned that as well. So that one big lens of investment. The second big lens of investment is the infrastructure that relate to the country itself. So the transportation, the public transportation, how you will invest in ports, how you will invest in supply chain end to end, and you make sure that that is there to stay, but also keep spending money until you improve it. And I think that Egypt, to His Excellency the President in the morning, Egypt have done a great start into that in the past 5 years, because you cannot go outside and promote for your country or promote for industries or investments without really having the bare minimum for those to come, put money, stay, but also make money, because investors are coming to make money, partially. So that will take us to the added value discussion as well, because investments has a lot to do with the added value, and I think there is a very good conversation today has been put into the added value industries. So I would call it the integrated industries, because that will take you all the way to the SMCs. So, for example, I think we have done a transformation on agriculture into expanding our agricultural lands in the past 7 years. We've added more than 2.5 to 3 million faddan in different areas, and that to deliver on the food security, deliver on the strategic crops. But guess what? We're still importing seeds from outside. That's $100 million required in order to grow crops, put them into trucks, and then maybe export some, but you will consume the majority into the country. So we have to take that to the second level, which basically, like the fourth generation of industry, that would be the fourth generation of agronomy. How can you establish R&D centers, not only in Egypt in that case, but an R&D center that will serve the entire continent? How to create partnership out of that. And the free trade agreements is a great environment to think about those visions as well.
Right, Mr. Farrick, last but definitely not the least, and being the last person to speak, that you can reflect on what you heard so far. So my question to you, reflecting on what you have heard, but also what else do we need to do differently to actually increase FDI and to meet the funding and investment needs that we have for our continent of free trade? So react to what you heard, but also what else should we do differently to innovate?
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll respond by putting my various...
If you get your mic a bit closer to you so we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
All right, go ahead.
I think everybody has made some very interesting points about what are the issues in Africa and what needs to be done. But let me just take a step back and say we've started moving in the right direction with PAPS, which is the Pan-Africa Payment and Settlement System. It's currently in 8 countries. 8 central banks have signed up, and we have around maybe 45 banks on the platform, and this enables African currencies to trade with other African currencies. But then we have 41 central banks in Africa, and we have 736 banks in Africa, and 436 million bank accounts in Africa, apparently. And I say this because sometimes we have to take a step back from the numbers and look at the reality. There is trade in Africa. There is trade between African countries. It is just not formal. And if you look at our borders, the reality is today in a town called Ilara, which connects Nigeria and Benin Republic, the border literally goes through somebody's toilet. If you look at the map, there's a house, half of it is in Nigeria, the other half is in Benin Republic. If you go to these places with your formal documentation, it will take you 4 hours to cross the border. If you show up with a motorcycle, with 6 bags of rice and a goat in front, nobody stops you. So we're already trading. The question now is, if we want to become big traders with each other and we want to formalize that trade, how do we make it work? I wear many caps. In our company, we import. We have an office in India. We have platforms in China, Vietnam. We also export from 4 or 5 African countries to Asia, to Europe. We have fishing trawlers that go into the Atlantic and we send shrimps to the Netherlands. But at the same time, we have an oil milling facility in Benin Republic that supplies Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. On the infrastructure side, I currently chair the board of the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund, Sovereign Investment Authority. And I also understand some of the challenges that we as Africans face in developing infrastructure. It's very easy for us to say it's important to do infrastructure, but sometimes the cost of compensating people in the process of building that infrastructure is more expensive than the project itself, because you probably have some sort of traditional burial ground, you have some sort of land that belongs to communities that are sacred. Then on the other side as well, we own a bank. I chair the board of the 6th largest bank in Nigeria. And when you look at the level of rejections due to people not being bankable, it's also an issue, because we say there are 1.1, 1.3 million Nigerians. Africans, apologies. We always talk about Nigeria, but then it's your fault. You put me in the Nigerian corner. I think this chair is dedicated to Nigerians. So, but when we talk about the 1.3 million Africans that are here on the continent, how many of those Africans are bankable? How do we make these Africans bankable as well? Because for them to trade with each other, for them to build the infrastructure that will produce the African goods that will be traded, they need to be bankable. How many Africans have formal forms of KYC requirements that are needed to get it done? And so, 41 central banks, 54 countries, God knows how many tribes and religions. Then the informal sector, which is flourishing. How do we get and learn from that informal sector? How do we appreciate these border communities that are trading with each other day in, day out? That is, I think, where we need to start learning from.
Excellent. In the few minutes we have left, I do not want us to lose sight of the topic of this conversation, and that is the financing of the implementation of our continental free trade within a very disrupted financial world. So I'm going to turn to each of you in a few seconds just to give me what would be the takeaway from this conversation that you think it's important that we have that in mind as we try to increase FDI toward Africa to support is a very important instrument. So, Andrew Dohani, I'm going to start with you. What will be your message? What will be your takeaway message from this conversation?
Well, as I said, it looks like we are on the right track, first of all. And I feel that from what I heard during this very two important days, that there are emphasis on really on the enablers to really have
Could you get the mic closer to you so we can hear you properly?
enablers to implement and make use of the potentials of the CFTA agreement. As I said, we are very keen and to see that. We're very happy to see that, you know, at least now everybody is speaking about really the need to go to the next step and also make sure that enablers funding is available. You know, for emphasizing what are the main challenges and we need to tackle them. I think we've heard about the infrastructure, and the second is that I said maybe also the policy reforms that is needed. I felt that there's a lot of emphasis on that because I think with these policy reforms can really make a difference. Now, if you can see that with the Afreximbank and Badia, just to give an example, we've had a very, very important program called the standardization or harmonization of the standard of the pharmaceutical and the medical equipments in Africa with ARSO. And I think this kind of really emphasis on these important projects, long-term projects, is very important. Two is the added value that we were talking about. The added value, now everyone, I'm sure, around this table, this hall, is convinced that, you know, Africa cannot continue to go by exporting raw material. Africa has to really do really or Africa will not continue to have 100% of its medication from outside, where we are having all the potentials here in Africa to really. So industrialization and also the added value is very important. Lastly, is I think that we as institution, you know, for us to make this very attractive to also to the foreign investors, that's what we try to do, so we are saying that financing alone is not going to be a game changer. We need to really bring business people together, put them together, B2Bs, and also have the chance to really you know, see the potentials together. Partnership is finally, the last point is partnership is the last point I would say. Without partnership, we cannot really achieve.
That's a nice way to end. Without partnership, we can't get it done. So, Mr. Tarma, I'm going to move over to you, and hopefully we could also get very quickly, what will be your takeaway from this conversation?
Very quickly, I will build on those points, actually. I think that trade representation is a key strategy that we really need to look at. How can we make Africa a big marketplace where those partnerships will be made? Those strategies on integrated industries come together, and how that win-win happen not only for the producer but also for the importers. I think that's a big thing that we have to reflect on, and overarching to that, or the guideline, the bigger framework will be the free trade agreement.
Excellent.
Second point to that is the logistics. How, to your point, how to innovate in end-to-end logistics, have solution for that, without really putting the infrastructure as the key discussion every time, because it will take time for that infrastructure to improve. That's a vision that has to be put together by different states, different governments, private sector on the table, make sure that we have the right financing. The last is the added value. It's a cutting edge. This is what's going to give the continent the competitive edge to compete with the rest of the markets.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And Mr. Caputo, what will be your takeaway from this conversation?
Let me say, echo what was already said. Definitely the importance of the cooperation, the partnership between public and private. Definitely what was told also this morning, let's say we need to have the capability to attract private investment. Definitely multilateral organization can enhance the attractiveness because there are instruments that can, let's say, reassure private investor. Let me say that what I see due to what is happening, because there is also in my country, in Italy, a debate with what happened in the last 5 years. We are rethinking the supply chain organization. So with the phenomenon of reshoring, nearshoring, and we believe that the Mediterranean area, including the south bank of the Mediterranean, can be definitely a region that can integrate much more. And definitely this could be the gateway to also to support the development, industrialization of Africa.
Let me try with Farouk. Maybe I will get a one-liner from my brother Farouk. What will be your takeaway from this conversation?
3 things. Afrexim should continue doing what they're doing. They should continue to push the boundaries for African solutions to African problems. Policymakers should continue to listen to the existing systems in place, the traditional methodologies of trading between African communities that is already there for hundreds and thousands of years. And finally, for the governments of Africa, we as Africans should be patient with them. The 54 different countries have different types of structures and constitutions. So partnership requires unitary republics and federal republics and the monarchies to all work together within their own frameworks and come up with that solution. I think with these 3 key takeaways, maybe this thing will become a reality. Thank you.
I think if there is one word that came up over and over again, it's about partnership, working together, joining forces, and also the importance of having the right enablers so we can actually get the FDI required to support this very important instrument. I heard a lot about incentive, motivations, making sure we can finance our youth, our women, but also our SMEs across Africa so we can get the funding required because the gap is huge. I'm actually going to bridge the protocol and call the President Orama. I know this was not part of the plan, but for what you heard so far, being an important organization that provide funding across the African continent, what would be your reaction to what you heard so far?
Well, thank you very much. I think our role here is to listen and take notes and see how the ideas that have been canvassed here and since yesterday can impact operations. And we've listened clearly to all our friends across in the Ensemble and the ITFC. They are strong partners in the Arab Africa trade bridges. So you see all of the people there, the BankMis, LX Bank, of course, Union Bank, all strong partners with whom we relate with every day, and all are shareholders, so to say. So the thinking process, the assessment of how we create a new beating path, because what we are doing now are new things. Trying to finance the AFCFTA is new. We have ideas, but we do not claim to have the monopoly of the ideas. So we will listen and use the contributions people are making from their different experiences to make sure we produce and implement solid programs and solid interventions that will push the boundaries, as Farouk suggested. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Obrigado. And see us here for our Chinese friends all the way from Beijing. And join me in thanking our panelists. Well done. Thank you.
A wonderful panel. Thank you very much. A big round of applause, not just for the panel, but also for the moderator, Ibrahima Chik Diong, the UN Assistant Secretary General and Director General of the African risk capacity group. We have, but I believe, 2 more panels to go before we conclude the second day of these meetings. There's been some great speakers, but it would be remiss of me not to recognize in the room the former Vice President of Nigeria, a strong, as I said yesterday, staunch supporter, not just of Afreximbank, but of Africa through his quiet diplomacy and his support. So please put your hands together for Namadi Sambo, His Excellency, the former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Also, you may have noticed, just coming to the room quietly too, is another Nigerian powerhouse, a titan in the field of business and philanthropy, one of the Nigerians we're most proud of as a fellow Nigerian, and that is in the guise of the chairman of Heirs Holding, Mr. Tony Elumelu. You're very welcome, sir. We'll hear from you later. And also in the room, I would like to for you to put your hands together with us is Mr. Kai R. Mivedo Sambiani, who is the Honorable Minister of Investment Promotion for the great nation of Togo, is with us as well. Honorable Minister, you're very welcome at these proceedings. Now we're going to go on to a next session. We've got 2 more sessions, and this one is called Catalyzing the Economic Transformation Power of Sovereigns in the AFCFTA Era. Catalyzing the economic transformation power of sovereigns in the AFCFTA area. For that, we do have a star speaker with us at the moment. I don't know if he's in the room yet. I'll have to make sure before I call on him. Yes, I see him. Yeah, he's a man that's so well known across Africa. You know, as Africa is going through an energy transition, which, by the way, should and will be dictated by Africa. Transition means transition, as I often say. We're at a very curious and unusual time if you're running an energy firm, if you're running an oil or a gas company, and you're making that transition and you're at the forefront of that transition. But I will say that the next gentleman has been thinking about this before it was fashionable. 15 years ago, they were already making moves into the renewable field and positioning themselves. So it's very interesting as we look at catalyzing the economic transformation power of sub-sovereigns in the AFCFTA era, to call upon Mr. Adewale Tinubu, Group Chief Executive of Owando PLC, to set the scene for this next panel. Please, you're very welcome to the stage.
The retired Vice President of Nigeria, I am not absolutely certain about the protocol in Egypt because I assume that there must be some members of the government here present. So please forgive me if I haven't got this right, but distinguished members of the government, the retired Vice President of Nigeria, the President of the African Export-Import Bank, and that shows the significance of the bank because the title is that of a political leader. Well, I mean, none can deny the impact the bank has had on business, economic growth and development in Africa. Today, it takes an increasing center stage role in the new dawn for the continent, and I was particularly excited by today's session with the president of Egypt. Maybe it was because it was my first time of actually seeing the host country of the African Export-Import Bank directly engage with the leadership of the bank, because in the rest of Africa, we claim Afrexim as ours, even though it's located in Egypt. That is because they've done so much in terms of directly impacting economic growth in terms of the major projects they've done across the board, across agriculture, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, oil, trading, the impact on small and medium-scale enterprises, as well as now their new focus on ensuring that we, as a continent, take the intra-African trade as a priority. Now, we're not doing so well in terms of the intra-African trade today. I mean, Europe is 67%, Asia 60%, the Americas 46%, Africa is 15%. And the key really is how do we drive this towards a measure where we can take the advantages of intra-African trade as a nation. I don't know if this is working, but okay, good, it is. Now, half the problem we have really is that we have challenges regarding this trade, and these challenges are what we've dealt with, what we consistently deal with. Some are hard, and I would like to call them the hardware of our challenges. Some are soft in terms of the software, which are ease of doing business and other aspects to do with that. But right now we have mineral products as the top traded. By value, it accounts for 10%. South Africa actually has the highest amount of intra-African trade that's going on. That region, 32%, followed by Nigeria. But Nigeria's primarily export is one dominant product, which is crude oil. So effectively, that doesn't really do much in terms of product diversification. Majority of the fastest growing cities in Africa are regions that are providing substantial increase in growth. Population of the continent, 17% of global population, 1.3 billion. And effectively, what we're seeing is cities being substantially increased and thus increasing the importance of sub-regions in the policy making for how we approach the increase in African trade. So 50% of Africans will be living in cities by 2030. We're going to have 1/3 of the youngest of the youth global workforce will be in sub-Saharan Africa by 2050. And sub-Saharan Africa is actually the largest growing urbanizing center in the continent. Actually in the world, not just the continent. Now, I mean, the AFTA is there for us, and really the drive has been to create a single market and create substantial growth, drive SMEs, facilitate industrialization, and reduction of the tariffs and removal of non-tariffs barriers which we have, which we all know are a major problem within the continent because countries see tariffs and customs duties as ways of raising revenues. And accordingly, there's not easy flow of goods within the continent because of the fact that countries see raising of revenues as a priority. But those revenues are automatically guaranteed if there is a larger amount of volumes of goods and services being moved within the city. So I mean, I was having a chat earlier on today, and we had Samad who had a cement operation in Sokoto and cannot take cement across the border into Niger, where there is cement coming from Turkey, from France, at much higher rates, even though he could supply the cement cheaper because of the fact that there's a perceived loss of duty because technically goods produced within Africa should be shipped within Africa on a duty-free basis, which is the essence of the African Free Trade Area Treaty. Now, in terms of challenges which we see, you know, we've always had major hindrances, which we do have, and one key area is the high cost of doing business. Transportation costs, which we've mentioned, basically 50 to 20% of import costs in Africa versus 3 to 4% in the developed world. It's cheaper to ship a container from US, $4,000, than it is to send a container to transport a container from Lagos to Kano, for example. How much more Lagos to Accra? Now, the Egyptian president today focused on his questions entirely on what it will take to improve the infrastructure within the continent. And these are big areas which have been done, and I'm encouraged to see that other institutions, for example, regional corridors are being created now. by the African Development Bank, which recently started its own arguments for a Lagos to Abidjan $21 billion superhighway. There's the dream, or should I say it's more than a dream, it's now a reality, which is the Cape Town to Cairo Road project, which is also being planned. There are also regional railways that are being set up and are being done across East Africa and West Africa. And for example, we have the Matadi Sokoto corridor that is being created in Nigeria. So the reality is that there is infrastructure that is being created to serve the continent. Then we have very basic soft issues like lack of integration to do with visas. It's much easier to have a foreign passport and have visa on arrival as a foreigner than to have a Nigerian passport or Ghanaian passport or Ugandan passport and move within the region. These are areas that do need to be tackled. There's the issue of currency, which the African Export-Import Bank has created a payment system which is about to be unleashed on the market. But really, we have 52 different currencies in Africa, and we probably spend approximately $5 billion a year in terms of currency costs and losses by converting currencies. And no wonder that small to medium scale enterprises in the continent are beginning to use cryptocurrency as a means of buying and selling goods and services between themselves in Nigeria today. It's interesting to know that in Nigeria, it's the biggest user of a cryptocurrency are small businesses who are buying goods and services across. Clearly, the challenges lay into what sub-sovereigns can play. And they are a vital role for driving the implementation. You can achieve faster regional integration through the subnationals. And subnationals are effectively local governments, states, and for example, forgive me for always going back home, Lagos is the fifth largest. If it was a country, it'd be the fifth largest economy in the world. So a state like Lagos should sit at the table when policies are designed towards facilitating intra-African trade. And they have started. For example, we have the key areas and key projects they've done for the export have been the export-free zone in Lagos, which now houses or will house yet another Afrexim project, which is a Dangote refinery. It's a 650 million barrel per day, 650,000 barrel a day refinery, of which the bank is reputed to have provided substantial funding for, and as well as other industries which are there and are providing exports. We, as Oando, built a gas pipeline system as well too, which has entirely focused on giving gas to local industries and giving them a competitive advantage to be able to export into the West African sub-region, something they couldn't do before because of the cost of doing that. Now, that was done entirely in negotiating with the sub-regional government in form of Lagos. And the point being that there is an increasing importance that sub-regionals, sub-sovereigns must be able to do towards ensuring that we can. Now, there's a lot to be said for the fact that sub-regionals have lost their economic bargaining power when it comes to economic policy, which have tended to be vested in the federal governments of countries, particularly as most of the African countries went from parliamentary systems to federal structures, wherein the resources go to the center and are now shared down to the areas. But in countries where the regions still hold economic power and contribute to the center, which is the reverse, you will find that those are probably more effective means of driving policy and creating an enabling environment for the expansion and the deepening of intra-African trade. Now, in terms of, I think, without a shadow of doubt, have been able to do this means economic transformation for the continent. I think one of the key areas really is the generation of employment opportunities. 70% of the jobs in Africa are small to medium scale enterprises. A majority of the trade of SMEs is not global export. It's actually regional trade, and that's really what gets utilized as a substitute for imports. So the deepening of our policies towards creating sovereigns towards being involved in the process of deepening intra-African trade is a priority. The treaty has been signed by 52 out of 54. I think Eritrea is the only country that hasn't been signed. And I know that there are moves towards ensuring that we go down one level from the national level to the subnational level towards deepening the policies in there. And the office has done a great job in terms of driving these policies home. I say the private sector has a big role to play. Public-private partnerships are critical, often a fast way of resolving the investment case, which is often a problem for internationals. I mean, the point was made today that why the countries African countries will issue bonds and the bonds will be 8%. Typical nations of similar credit risk will issue bonds and it will be 2%. Why do we have to borrow at such high levels? And if we're going to borrow at such high levels, it means a lot of our projects may not be bankable, or, for example, infrastructure projects require a cost level that is pretty low at the beginning because they are long-term. So take, for example, a national gas distribution system. Now, if the cost is too high, it means the industries can't benefit from the cheap gas. It means that the project doesn't work commercially. Even though gas is provided, it's at a high level that cannot create economic growth within society. So it's often left on nationals or subnationals, like in this situation, to invest the capital, a percentage of their capital that ensures that the private sector can invest its money side by side towards making the price of the product achievable. And then it means that more people can absorb it, and over the years, it becomes bankable. Private sector models have worked in ways that have created multinationals within the African space and a lot of intra-African trade. Check the telecoms industry, where we see there's something like 400 million lines in Africa, all private sector driven, the bulk of them, and a lot of them were done by indigenous companies, MTN, Glo, created. And a lot of these things were created with local policies supported by local financial institutions, and they were able to create elements of trade within the continent. We also have the issue of beneficiation and local processing. Take the cocoa industry, for example, the $150 billion industry, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, total value $150 billion globally. In Africa as a continent, what we retain here is $10 billion, which is 7%. Now, there clearly is a major need to ensure that the aspect of beneficiation be kept as a big core of the discourse regarding trade. Now, subnationals have done a lot, and I should mention that also that they have done quite a bit in creating infrastructural development. I did mention there are loads of examples I could give, but the role of the financial institutions does need to be emphasized. Leveraging technology, digital banking to improve connectivity. We're not going to be able to achieve the sort of growth we do require without financial incentives. And so far, so good. There has been big steps taken in terms of creating financial inclusion across the board, and having these as part and parcel of the areas that we need to look at. Now, in terms of states, there have been major states done. And I could reel off a lot of projects, but we don't have much time that have been done at subnational level that derive with the principle of creating trade. As the geometric project, which was the 50 billion, which was completed, had been on the shelf for a long time, and completed by Afrexim financing, $50 million, which had been sorted out by ALSA. Niger State has done some work in terms of jobs in the agricultural sector. And Bayelsa, and there are several regional ports that have been signed up for. Akwa Ibom, Rivers are all considering deep sea ports, which are at sub-national level, but all driven towards exports. I hope and pray that with all the other existing policies and that have been created and efforts that are being made, we would see a lot of these efforts and infrastructure being driven towards intra-African trade as opposed to straightforward exports into European or American or Asian destination. In our regard, we're doing quite a bit ourselves. From the financing side, we work with Afreximbank as Orlando, my personal experience, MCB, RMB, Standard Bank. So we do quite a bit of financing in there. We invest across African sub-region in many African countries, upstream operations, downstream operations, and these have been done with the support of those institutions, and we look forward to being able to do more with the institution as well as with all the colleagues in this room. And I think I probably should take a break now to have the panel discuss the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're not off the hook, though, because we want you to join at the panel, so you can grab a seat here. Let's see. Thank you very much, sir. Adewale Tinubu, Group Chief Executive of Wando PLC, setting the scene there for the panel session that's coming up in a second, catalyzing the economic transformation power of sub-sovereigns in the AFCFTA era. A very important milestone every 2 years for the AFCFTA is the Intra-Africa Trade Fair. The next one is coming up next year, 2023. On the 21st to the 27th of November in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan. This is the Afreximbank in collaboration with the African Union and the AFCFTA Secretariat brings you the third Intra-Africa Trade Fair. So please join us in Côte d'Ivoire on the 21st to the 27th of November. This is something you must not miss. You can find more information at info@intraafricantradefair.com, info@intraafricatradefair.com, or just go to the booth outside. You can register right today or tomorrow. Just go to the booth outside, and my colleagues will help you to get your name on the roster. Okay, let's move on to a very short panel session, given that we are way behind time now, but it's going to be a snappy one. While you're sitting down, I'm going to bring some people to join you. But first, I want to introduce them. We have an excellent moderator. He is responsible for supervising most of the content for West Africa for CNBC Africa. Please welcome to moderate this session, broadcaster Wole Famurewa.
Thank you very much, Mark, and Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for sticking around for this conversation, and I do believe it will be valuable. So we're speaking about sub-sovereigns, and I think that for many reasons they are very important in the context of driving trade on the continent. Indeed, some studies have already proven in Europe that you can easily track the performance of entire regions on that continent to the performance of some sub-sovereigns. So we're delighted to discuss this in the context of Africa, and I will just very quickly now invite our speakers, panelists for this conversation, starting with Mr. Ravi Pillay. He is a member of the Executive Council for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs in the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Government in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him to the stage, Mr. Ravi Pillay. I think we can do better than that. We can be more generous with the applause. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you so much, Mr. Pile. We also have Ms. Kanayo Awani, and you've always known her as the Managing Director, Intra-Africa Trade Initiative, but have been reliably informed that that portfolio has expanded to some extent. Effective July 1st, she is the Vice President, Intra-Africa Trade at the Afreximbank. I think for that alone, she deserves a very resounding round of applause. Thank you so much, Kanayo, for joining us for this. Of course, we have Mr. Wale Tinubu already on stage, the Group CEO of Owando, but we also have some other sub-nationals participating in this conversation, and we have representing the Governor of Niger State, the Commissioner for Finance for that state. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Zakari Abubakar as he joins this conversation, all the way from Nigeria. Please, if we can be more generous with our applause as he comes. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us for this. We also have Mr. Maxwell Ebiba, who is the Commissioner of Finance for Bayelsa State, also in Nigeria, joining the conversation. Thank you very much for participating. All right, we don't have much time, so let's get right into it. And I think I'll start with Kanayo, if she can share some perspective on this, because we know that the Afreximbank has been very supportive of subnational governments in trying to drive intra-Africa trade. And I recall at the last intra-Africa trade fair event in Durban, South Africa, there was the kickoff, if you like, of the African Sub-Sovereign Network. And I think perhaps this audience would like to understand what that is and perhaps some milestones that you have reached since the formation of that network.
Okay, thank you. As you know, in Afreximbank, we are implementing a sixth strategic plan, which builds on the fifth one, which ended in 2021. And intra-African trade and the implementation of the AFCFTA is the arrowhead of our strategy. What that means is, and that's the division that I so graciously lead, every day what we try to do is to say how we can creatively see to the implementation of the CFTA, introduce initiatives, conceptualize activities to help us to see that it succeeds, and then traffic and trade inches up from the current 15 to 18% that it is. So we are sponsoring the sub-sovereigns network because, first of all, the subnationals are those that have the direct interaction with the citizens and the businesses, including youth and women, and we see it as a vehicle for sub-sovereigns to expand their roles in deepening intra-African trade and investments. We also see it as a vehicle for building infrastructure, as well as creating a greater participation in the AFCFTA. And then you could ask me why. The AFCFTA is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So we have to see the implementation get down to the lower levels, to the grassroots in a sense, and as I said, to the citizens and to the businesses, because they have the direct interaction as well. If you think about those who want to decentralize, how would you decentralize? These are the kind of instruments that will help you decentralize and expand your fiscal revenues, and also stop the reliance on single or maybe from federal allocations. It will drive, like I said, infrastructure development. And we've seen it in some of the things that we do. We're supporting infrastructure, trade carrying infrastructure in some of the sub-sovereigns. It will also help regional value chains. It's not just regional value chains cross-border, but it's also regional value chains within a country. Leather in Niger State can make its way, it can be processed and make its way to Abia State is not here. They were supposed to be, to the light manufacturing sector. It can also make its way across borders. That's what we're trying to promote, increase in traffic and trade And of course, by building on the value chains, they are then able to actually integrate into the global value chains. I'll leave it here, but I'll also have loved to talk about some of the products. We're not just promoting the soft sovereign network, and I know you did ask about the milestones.
Yeah.
So since Durban, what has happened is that you will remember that in Durban, Nigeria offered to host the next conference. In Durban, KwaZulu-Natal hosted it. We came out, there was a communique that was issued, and that communique was exactly what I just said, as a vehicle to drive intra-African trade increase, and FCFTA implementation as a vehicle to promote greater participation in the AFCFTA, vehicle to increase, to build on infrastructure, trade carry infrastructure, and there are others. The next workshop, the next conference is supposed to hold in Abuja, I think about November 14th, and we are working with the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum on that.
Right. Well, we look forward to that meeting as well and the big takeaways from that. But if I can go to Mr. Ravi Pillay now, you obviously were the host of that last event, and there's no doubt that KwaZulu-Natal plays a very important role, not only in the economy of South Africa, but indeed that entire region, especially when you think about the impact of that port in Durban. Can you speak to the opportunities and challenges that you see as sub-nationals begin to embrace this whole concept of the Africa Common Free Trade Area as an opportunity?
Well, thank you very much, moderator, and greetings to everyone, especially Professor Rama. Let me convey the warm greetings of Premier Sishle Zikalala, whom you know very well, and was supposed to have been here and just 2 days ago got pulled out to another emergency, but sends his very warm greetings. And I make special mention of that because Professor Rama would know how important leadership is in driving implementation. And in our Premier Sishle Zikalala, there's an extraordinary passion and energy for this particular program and indeed the African agenda. I think we won't be able to say that all sub-sovereigns would be able to perform or there's the same opportunity, but I'd like to think that in KwaZulu-Natal we do have a special opportunity. Of course, firstly, we are one of 9 provinces. We are second largest in population, second largest in GDP contribution, currently at about 17% to South Africa's GDP. The 2 harbors, Richards Bay and Durban Harbor, 60% of imports and exports, not just to South Africa, but to Southern Africa, go through those ports. And then, of course, we have our arterial roads, the N3 and the N2, which are critical to the logistics of that particular operation. We're a diversified economy. I think that's important. We in fact, in our economic recovery plan, have broken it up into 14 sectors. So from agriculture, manufacturing is actually top now, which is important for the agenda that we are here for as far as African Free Trade Agreement is concerned. So manufacturing is top, tourism, agriculture and agro-processing, and the list goes on. So we think the opportunities are enormous. But despite the graph that was shown that shows South Africa as having a fairly large slice of intra-Africa trade fair, we have many of the challenges that all other African countries face. There's an inequality problem, there's a huge youth unemployment problem, and so we've got to together find the solutions that are addressing those fundamental issues. And I think that's where we've got to work together. I've said to many people that I've met here that we don't know each other enough, and we pay tribute to Professor Rama and Afreximbank for creating the platforms for bringing us together, and that's absolutely critical. But the next point is to trade, you must have something to trade. And that's where production comes in, local production. How do we stimulate that? How do we incentivize, as has been said? I don't know how much time you want to give me, but we can talk about some specific programs that we are engaged in so that we can share these experiences and learn from each other.
No doubt, I'm sure you can share so much, but if you can just speak very briefly, maybe for a minute, on how the African Common Free Trade Area Agreement offers an opportunity to really scale some of your initiatives.
No, absolutely. As you can see, the trade numbers are speaking for themselves, but how much more of a push that will have if the details of the trade AFCFTA was concluded and implemented. What a boost it would be if our goods and products could cross borders without duties or tariffs. And that's the incentive that we want to bring into that particular equation. I mean, there's so many examples of products that are bought from, leave alone the question of raw materials going out, being beneficiated outside and coming in. But there are many other things which we can simply produce ourselves. And if the AFCFTA is able to produce that, provide that market, that platform, then the incentive is there to produce. Of course, we have to then deal with the issues of production to quality and cost and market access. Of course, the AFCFTA will then talk to the market access part. But there's a whole lot of detail between that production and getting it to that market access, which we also have to deal with. But to answer your question, if the AFCFTA was fully operational, what a powerful impetus and incentive that would be for production everywhere, because we know that we would have this market at a competitive edge, and that's the bottom line.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's go now to Nigeria, and let's speak to the Commissioner of Finance in Niger State, Mr. Abubakar. I would like you to speak to the opportunity you are seeing, but maybe it's valuable to share thoughts about the challenges that some subnationals are facing, because subnationals cannot create monetary policy. Subnationals very often cannot create fiscal policy that are impacting the investment opportunities in their provinces or states. So in the context of such challenges, I want to hear how you are navigating the opportunities, and also if you can speak potentially to the partnerships that you are finding with other sub-sovereigns.
Thank you very much. I bring you the compliments of my governor, His Excellency Alhaji Abubakar Sani Bello, and also the same particularly to the president of Afreximbank and Professor Rama, who has been very supportive of Niger State. I will go straight to the point or to the issues. They are basically two or three. First, we are one of 36 sub-sovereigns. If you add the FCT in Nigeria, that will be 37. And in terms of regions, we're in the north or north central, if you like, and we're one of 19 states there. Geographically, we're literally, if you discount the River Niger, we're landlocked. And we found ourselves in a situation where we depend so much on federal transfers and needed to break out of that ceiling in terms of our ability to fund development. And strategically so, we thought we have two markets really, one within the country and then beyond in Africa, and then started looking for partnerships. Leveraging on our advantage, which is in agriculture. And to go again further, the Afreximbank offered an opportunity to us when we particularly met in Durban, and then from then we've not looked back in terms of, one, building the relationship from the advice they're giving us in terms of the financial weight we needed to have in terms of our ability to meet commitments made in the projects. And then secondly, to look for partners that will enable us trade both in Africa and beyond. We've leveraged, like I said, on our advantages in agriculture. Specifically now we have projects targeted at meat production for markets in Africa here. We've had discussions only yesterday with two companies that are to support us with that. And in that, we also have embedded a project for producing fodder, alfalfa crop and napier grass specifically, to feed those of our brothers or regions in Africa that have climate issues in terms of growing those crops. We have a partner in Senegal for that. And in terms of the feedstock for animals, we're developing partnerships in Chad, in Niger, and Burkina Faso, so that we have a supply, a constant supply of animal feedstock. That's the kind of thing we're doing. I'm just trying to run through as quickly as I can. But let me say, in terms of the restrictions that you mentioned, that we're breaking out by mainly focusing on private sector partnerships, ensuring that the restrictions that are imposed by government or government's ability to move are removed through these partnerships. And we're building, if you like, a war chest by dedicating a portion of our revenues towards that. What Kanayo had advised in South Africa, working towards these bonds or municipal bonds or, if you like, state bonds, not denominated in naira but in foreign currency. So we begin to build hedge, against the risks of foreign currency and all that. So for me, I think I see really, yes, there are restrictions, but we have to open our minds. We have to look, far beyond the present and take advantage of opportunities as they come. Thank you.
No doubt. We all have to roll our sleeves in these difficult times. Let's go now to Bayelsa State and speak to the Commissioner of Finance there as well. Mr. Biba, if you can just share your perspective on this conversation about partnerships across the continent. When I think of Bayelsa State, the first thing that comes to my mind is oil. The second is agriculture. How are you looking to leverage the buoyancy of resources in your state to trade with the rest of Africa?
Thank you very much. I'm representing my governor here today. He was in the conference yesterday, but I had to leave for urgent state issues. For the program we are attending, you've highlighted something very critical, that for subnationals, there is so much restrictions on what we can do by the fact that the sovereigns are empowered to take decisions on trade tariffs, some issues on corporate taxation and all that. So for states, we are a bit limited. However, there is something we all need to know here. We need to understand that this trade treaty is not just a trade treaty for economic development, but in real sense, it's a treaty for development of the individuals, of the citizens. And the first point of connection between the citizens and governance is at the subnational level. If that's the case, then I will be expecting the African Union and all relevant institutions to begin to, as we set up as the framework or the protocols for the treaty, the agreement goes on, to also take time and establish deliverables expected of the sovereigns at the subnational levels. If there is no conscious effort to do that, then we'll be missing it out. We'll be missing out on the opportunities that are actually there. Because the subnationals are the closest to the people. For us, we are the center of the Niger Delta of Nigeria. We have the longest coastline in, as a state in Bayelsa State, in Nigeria. And the opportunities that exist there are within the marine logistics sector, transportation. The state government in that instance we are already promoting the Agge Deep Sea Port, which we believe will form which is properly located to be a logistics base or transportation hub within the Gulf of Guinea.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you there. So the state is bearing the burden of delivering that port.
The state is bearing the burden of doing the initial hard work, land acquisition, engaging the communities, developing the business plan. Ultimately, we are at the point of operating as PPP, working with private partners to develop the port. That's some of the reasons why we are here for this conference. And we believe not just this conference, we will also engage other partners and see that we actualize that project. Because we see enormous opportunities coming from this treaty, arising from this treaty. However, just to also highlight here, the sovereigns will need to also create further awareness on the benefits of this program. Some of us are already keen in, some of us are already, we are doing things to take advantage of the program, but how well has it been done in the country? So two key things, the sovereigns need to deliberately encourage the subnationals to, in respect of projects and initiatives that we take under this agreement and treaty. The other issue needs to be that of awareness, creation of awareness, so that both the private citizens and other subnationals in the countries need to be aware of it.
Sounds very exciting, and we look forward to seeing that project take off indeed. Of course, with the support, I imagine, of the Afreximbank. Before I go back to Kanayo and some of the other speakers, I must come to Mr. Tinubu. You are holding the private sector hat here in this conversation, so we'd like to hear you chime in. And very often it's said that capital goes to where it's welcome. As private capital is moving across sub-sovereigns across the continent, and of course within specific countries, I want to hear your perspective on this topic about how that private capital can be situated to drive intra-Africa trade in these sub-sovereigns.
The point you're making is valid, and what concerns me the most really is that there's competition globally for capital, there's competition within Africa for capital and for the location of businesses. So the more plausible your environment is, the more capital will flow to your environment. So one of the things that I find interesting about Africa is that the countries that have tourism as a priority for where their income comes from tend to be very organized countries. The ease of doing business tends to be a priority. There's arrival at the airport is simple, visa secure, getting a visa is simple. Starting a business tends to be very simple in those countries, and there's transparency in what you can and cannot do, which really drives economic growth. And I find that there's complexity in other areas. And even though we're talking about subnationals today in this panel, the reality is that subnationals have the responsibility of ensuring that there is a home for businesses to thrive. So if we take Bielsa, for example, we do a lot of oil production in Bielsa, and whilst Bielsa is focused on logistics bases and other aspects, there's one key thing that goes on in their location, which is the oil production. And two things they could do, I would like to say, they could get involved in oil projects, small-scale oil projects, capture the gas flare, create value, and everything. I feel the time is coming where subnationals can organize corporates, small corporates. They have a brand, they can raise money, they could do joint ventures, private-public sector partnerships with the private sector, and they could do projects which could generate a substantial amount of income for their local communities. I think that's something which should encourage. It used to be big in the 60s, but as our constitutions changed and we became more federal structures, and we must accept Africa went through a whole strife of civil wars in the 70s, and now there's, I think something like 95% of the countries are now democratized, but in the process, the central governments got a lot of central power and a lot of responsibility was taken away from subnationals. And so there has been a movement, but also even the responsibility for peace. Bayelsa, we have a lot of militancy, a lot of attacks on our facilities, and unfortunately, we don't. I'm not calling out the state government, but I feel that we need to have more of an engagement in terms of making a very safe environment for us. If not, at the end of the day, the capital goes elsewhere. And we saw that happen, for example, in another state of the Federation, Delta, where all of us were situated. Delta became very bad. Okay, Warri was really terrible. And we all moved our head offices out, and everybody moved out. And we moved to Bayelsa and Rivers. Now, the challenges are coming there now. So the point has been made regarding the responsibility for safety in businesses, and it's one that's worth commenting about.
I think he wants to say something about that.
Uh,
Very quickly, if you can, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Wale Tinubu, we appreciate your observation, but before we even come to that, I guess you're aware that in addition to all the things we've been doing in terms of security, is part of key government responsibility.
Absolutely.
And in addition to all that we've been doing, there have been a decline in criminal activities around the Gulf of Guinea. Now, when we have those situations around the Gulf of Guinea, Bayelsa is the closest state to the Gulf of Guinea in that area. So the temptation is there to think that Bayelsa is able to control some of those control the security around that area, those activities will reduce. However, it's the primary responsibility of government, the federal government in the coastal waters. So that's a bit limiting for us. But for internal security, we've passed a new bill into law for neighborhood community safety corps. And part of the reasons we're doing that is to ensure that we're able to rein in our people. We're able to, because security is something that starts with the community. And if all the initiatives we have, like, for instance, we appreciate the fact that we have the highest gas deposits in Nigeria, and we want to exploit the opportunities around gas and gas industries. So we are moving ahead. We have set up the community safety corps. We have put in quite a huge amount of money into that. It's a new initiative. I want to see that by the time the initiative kicks off fully, that even the situation we have will improve further.
Right. I'm beginning to get my cue. I need to wrap this up. I really would have loved to engage the rest of the panel, but I would like to allow Kanayose for 1 minute some of the financing options that the likes of Afreximbank are making available to sub-nationals who are looking to build ports like Bayelsa is trying to do, and so forth.
So maybe I should start with what he said.
So if you can just speak into the mic.
So the trade he talked about between Niger and Niger and Burkina Faso on feed mill, we can finance that. He talked about bonds. In Durban, I talked about diaspora bonds, which we can facilitate. A state like Kerala in India has financed its airport developments from the diaspora. The diaspora have the closest patrimony to their home states and to their local governments. That's something we can support, the diaspora bonds. In Nigeria, we're supporting a sub-national with industrial park, an industrial city, in an integrated power project as well. You also know of African Quality Assurance Center, which is essentially a testing, inspection, and certification center to deal with issues of standards, quality infrastructure, because as we talk about the AFCFTA, we have to also deal with non-tariff barriers like standards, unharmonized standards and issues like that. Their project preparation facility is available. We also spoke to a sub-national, about helping them bring their projects to a bankable state such that they can be financed. We also have our impact equity fund, which is FEDA. It's all available for businesses. Talking about trade and investment, we are also enabling investments through to sub-sovereigns. We're actually facilitating businesses going from, say, a sub-national in Egypt to KwaZulu-Natal, for instance. They are trying to develop their fisheries and aquaculture sector, and it's an Egyptian company that is doing that. So they're all very awesome. We are also financing the investment because we have investment finance programs. We have investment guarantees that protect investors against some of the risks, that perceived risks that are maybe out there, and ensure that their investments are protected. Contract agriculture is something that is surfacing very often, where farmers are being contracted from one subnational into another, to promote and contract manufacturing as well. These are some of the products that that already we're implementing, and that they are available for subnationals to promote the network.
Right. Well, I have no doubt if I allowed you to continue, you probably roll out a lot more products and services that you're offering. But no doubt the subnationals are important. It's a treacherous environment these days. But I believe that as more subnationals across the continent partner to drive intra-Africa trade, this train that has left the station, the African Common Free Trade Area, will be a successful trip. Thank you so much. Please, can you put your hands together for our panelists? And on that note, I'll hand over back to Mark.
Thank you, Wale, for that steering of what was an excellent panel. We are now on to our final, and we're not going to disappoint you with the final panel. I think we have two elements left. We have a panel now, and then we have a signing, a deal signing, or an agreement signing, should I say, at the end that ends the day. Now, many of you would have heard the term Afro-capitalism. Afro-capitalism. That term was coined by Mr. Tony Elumelu, and he believes that it holds the key to many of the things we're trying to achieve to have the continent's well-being extended. Afro-capitalism is an economic philosophy that the African private sector has the power to transform the continent through long-term investments, creating both economic prosperity and social wealth. So, the subject for the final discussion of the second day of these meetings is, can African financial institutions create Afri-capitalists critical to the AFCFTA implementation? Can African financial institutions create Afri-capitalists critical to the AFCFTA implementation? So you know who I'm going to call on now, right? So give him a warm round of applause. He is the chairman of Hares Holdings, Mr. Tony Elumelu himself. We'd also like to welcome back to the stage our host, none other than His Excellency President Benedict Orama, President of Afreximbank, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you ask anyone in this conference, or indeed any conference, what the biggest barrier to Africa's competitiveness and industrialization is, many of them will probably say energy, power. Our final speaker that we're going to introduce you to in a moment is very much at the center of solving that. Power is still a huge challenge to get the lights on and get the turbines turning. And the final of our third panelist is one of the leading lights. I'm sorry, that's a terrible pun, but he is one of the leading lights in the power sector, and he's a true Pan-African player. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of El Sawidi Electric, Mr. Ahmed El Sawidi. And you probably noticed the very familiar face of the moderator. She's very well known, formerly of CNBC and now of the Nielsen Network, to moderate this excellent star panel, none other than Bronwyn Nielsen. Bronwyn, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mark, and you've done an excellent job with introductions. We're honored to have such an esteemed panel with us here. And of course, we're looking at how African institutions can create Afri-capitalists to implement the AFCFTA. So I'm going to start by asking you all just a warm-up question. What does the African Continental Free Trade Area mean to you? And you all going to get the same question. Ahmed, I'm starting with you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. First, I would like to thank you very much for this. And also to thank Afreximbank and our brother, Dr. Orama, for all the support he's giving to Africa and all the support Afrexim is giving to Africa. Really great job, especially for development and for the future and for better future for Africans. Of course, this point of the free trade is great for Africa. Especially, this will encourage a lot of countries to work together, 100%. But also, I feel that this will be for the benefit of the much advanced countries than the less advanced countries. So, if you are looking for jobs in a lot of African countries, I think there will not be manufacturing. There will be less investments, especially in manufacturing, and there will be less jobs. So I believe it will be for the benefit of some countries and for non-benefit of others. Of course, I believe that it must be controlled or done with the way that how to increase the investments in all countries and how to increase the trading. Thank you.
President Orama, what does the African Continental Free Trade Area mean to you, sir?
Thank you very much. Let me welcome our friends and partners, clients, Tony and Ahmed, for sparing the time to join us here, and to our colleagues and friends who are still remaining here despite a very long day of activities. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement is for us, and when I say for us, I mean myself and my colleagues at the bank, the final journey to freedom for Africans. The journey started 60 years ago when many of our countries gained political independence. But as we gained political independence, many of the visionary leaders who fought for that independence knew that it was just the beginning of the journey. We were not yet independent. Those who were old enough to follow what was happening in the 70s and even 80s, and I'm sure even started in the 1960s, we used to have what was called neocolonialism. See, we came out of colonialism in the 1960s and entered the stage of neocolonialism. So the journey that we started with the AFCFTA is to remove the neo and remove the colonialism so that we will then become economically free, be able to stand up on ourselves, by ourselves, be able to pursue our aspirations without going around with a beggarly bowl and people then offer us what they wish. And as we always say, people say, a beggar has no choice. We want to be able to have a choice when we speak to our partners. Thank you.
Tony, I say AFCFTA, and you say, sir?
So, we do not trade amongst ourselves in Africa. Intra-Africa trade is less than 12%, and there's a reason for this. And I believe the AFCTA is actually designed to help us address some of these reasons, especially when it comes to border issues, in regulatory issues, custom tariff, etc. issues, but more importantly, to help us support the private sector, because Africa will trade amongst and within itself if we have and produce what our people need. If we don't produce what our people need, we can complain that intra-Africa trade is poor forever, and it will not change. To change that, we need to identify and support our small-scale enterprises in all these African countries so that we, in future, create our own multinational corporations. That is what AFCT, to a large extent, is supposed to help us achieve. And I want to commend the role of Afrexim. I want to commend the role of the board management, and most importantly, the President's Chief Executive Officer of Afrexim. Access to electricity is critical for the industrialization of Africa. Access to electricity is important for us to produce what we need on the continent. If we do not support the private sector involvement and investment in this sector, we can have AFCT on paper that will not work. I speak as someone who invests in the power sector in Africa. Within our group, we have about 2,000 generating capacity of electricity plants. We support Nigeria and some other African countries. And I've seen firsthand the support of institutions like Afrexim in helping us and others advance these aspirations. What I'm saying today is AFCTA is important, but for AFCTA to work, there are things we must do. And I want to recognize those and institutions that actually helping to galvanize and put energy to that drive for Africa to trade amongst itself. And to use this opportunity also to call on other development finance institutions, to call on other regional or continental finance institutions, that in the 21st century, what is important to us in Africa is not necessarily the size of capital that development finance institutions have. What is important is how we deploy that capital to help industrialize and develop Africa, so that the purpose for which AFCTA was set up can be realized and achieved. And again, I want to say big well done to Afrexim for leading in this direction. Thank you.
Ahmed, I want to come back to you here and look at whether African companies across both the public, private sector are doing enough to support industrialists, to support entrepreneurs. What is your view?
You mean African countries?
Companies. So basically, if we look at El Saudi Electric,
Yeah.
creating the next generation of industrialists, of entrepreneurs, are we doing enough on the African continent?
Really, of course, we believe in this very much. We believe in the African continent. As example, we believe that we need investments. We need a lot of other things for the next 50 or 100 years. By the way, we are as a SWE Electric, we are investing in more than 50 countries worldwide, between Africa, the Gulf region, Latin America, all over Europe and Asia. Our best place for investment, best return is Africa. For this, even as African company, we are really investing a lot in entrepreneur, trying to support the young generation a lot, either in education, either with the startups. Really, we have a lot of incubators for them to think, to have better future, not only in Egypt, all over Africa. We have, as example, this year we recruited over 1,000 young graduates from Tanzania, from Zambia, from Nigeria, all over Africa. We are giving them 1 year training to be really the engine for the future. Thank you.
Very well said. So the youth will be the engine for the future. And President Jarama, I want to pick up on that theme because we've seen the youth being celebrated at the Afreximbank annual meetings this year. They are the implementers of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Do you believe, sir, that we are doing enough for our young people as they are our future?
No, it's not fair to you.
So I was just saying, in terms of young people and entrepreneurs, picking up from what Ahmed was saying, is that they are the future. They have to implement the African Continental Free Trade Area. Are we doing enough for young people?
I think that we cannot do enough. Let me put it that way. Because the young people have to do more than we do for them. They have to have the hunger to rise above their abilities. That is the only way they can become the Tony Elumelus of tomorrow. That's where they can become Amedese Widis of tomorrow. I take Tony, for example. As a young man, first of all, he took over a bank, an ailing bank, and got it back to start operating. And then he didn't stop there. And that's why I'm saying that the ambition should, more than you. He went and took over what was then, I think, maybe the second or third largest bank in Nigeria. If you went to anybody, any business person, and told the person, an older business person, said, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing, the person probably will say that something has gone wrong with him, or that he had come, or he would just wonder whether Tony had overnight become a 419 person who came to, what we call 419 is fraudster, who just found a way to defraud him. But he had this big ambition, which only his youth could help him accomplish. And he did that effectively. If you take S. Willie, he just mentioned to you the extent of their spread around the world. Big conglomerate, power, not only power in terms of power generation, manufacturing, manufacture turbines, manufacture bulbs, manufacture cables, construction, utility company, industrial infrastructure, all around the world. I don't think that there are that ambitions like that have to be pulled along by somebody. But we have to do something. And what we have to do is to make sure we create the environment that we will make the youth, the young ones, aspire and look up and see the sky as their limit. That environment that gives them the education, that tells them that if they have good ideas, they can be anything they want to be. The environment that makes it possible for them to have a level playing field with others around the world. An environment in terms of level playing field that gives them electricity, the power, the basic infrastructure, peace and security, education, the kinds of things people need, and then they go and go out and compete with the rest of the people in the world. That's what we have to give to them. And that, for me, may be enough from a government and other policymaker perspective, but it may not be enough. It will not be enough to turn a young person into the great people of the type that are sitting with me here. The difference is the hard work, the drive, the ambition, the integrity. Those are the things that nobody can give to others. These are the values they pick up as they grow. Society will only provide the environment for them to pick it up.
I think that deserves a round of applause. Midway in the panel, we can never do enough for our youth. And this is, again, a theme that is being widely celebrated here at the Afreximbank annual meetings. Tony, I have been asked specifically to ask you this question. Can you please define an Afri-capitalist?
Okay, well, I think, but before I say that, let me comment on something that the president of Afrexim said, and also Ahmed, about youth, because I'm extremely passionate about young ones. I believe that the future of our continent really belongs to them, and I think, and that's one of the reasons I like this Afrexim this year's AGM, because the theme is about supporting our youth, small, medium-scale enterprises, and empowering them to take charge and lead the future. The advice that Professor Rama gave is so important. I just want to add to that our young ones should look for role models, and these days in Africa, many abound. We have Absamad Rabiu, we have Wale Tinubu, we have Strive Masewa, we have Aliko Dangote, and we have a couple of them on the continent. And we have Ahmed and others. So you look up to people. When I was growing up, I like to read biographies, autobiographies, know about people, how they got to where they are or where, lessons from it. Because Professor Rama was saying lessons of hard work, discipline, integrity, ambition. Let's dream big, but let's also realize that dreaming is just 1% of it. The critical component is working hard, staying focused, staying disciplined, making quick, short-term sacrifices for a better future. These are things that will help our young ones to succeed. As our young ones succeed, all of us on the continent will succeed. We succeed in so many ways. And that also is critical to the philosophy of Afro-capitalism that I'm asked to speak on. So Afro-capitalism is actually, in real terms, what we're discussing today, what we're doing here, what Afrism is aiming to do on the continent, catalyzing prosperity, catalyzing economic opportunities, helping to create social inclusiveness on the continent. It's about, in my own journey, realizing that, I could not have gone to where I've managed to get to if I was not lucky at some point in time, if I didn't get support to get there, and thinking, what can the private sector do as we make progress, as we help to take Africa to the next level? It's about the private sector in Africa playing its own role for the development of the continent by investing. What Wale is doing, what Ahmed is doing, what Samad is doing, what Dangote and others are doing, is all helping to catalyze economic opportunities on our continent by investing in critical sectors of the African economy that help to create that prosperity that we need on the continent. In Africa Free Trade we're talking about here cannot succeed if we do not have private sector come up to play its own role by investing. We need to create food, address food security on our continent. It's not government that will do that. Government needs to create the right environment, as Professor Rama said. But we, the private sector, must step forward and help do that. We need access to electricity on the continent. Government cannot do, but government must create the right environment for this to succeed. The African entrepreneurs and global entrepreneurs should see Africa as a good investment destination. But again, our governments have a key role to play in making sure that that private capital, global private capital that is seeking the right destination, they find our continent as the right place. So the summation of private sector investment interaction in helping to create and advance prosperity on the continent is at the heart of Afrocapitalism. It's a call on all of us at private sector to play our own role, invest not just what we have. I say to people, it's not what we have in bank accounts that count at the end of the day. What matters is what we do with the money, the wealth we have, either by the investments we have created to create more jobs on the continent, or by people we have helped to economically empower. At the Tony Elumelu Foundation, we support young African entrepreneurs. We give each of them $5,000 non-refundable seed capital every year from the $100 million commitment, not because we have so much, but because we want to play our own role as private sector leaders in Africa to help create the next generation of African private sector leaders. But the good thing is not only us doing it, others are doing the same thing. I know that Samar Ravi has come up with even more ambitious program, but we need more. We need more. We need more of our successful people. So let's think less about what is in the bank account. Let's invest that in a manner that helps to catalyze economic prosperity. But I will not end my short intervention here. I don't know if I have an opportunity to speak again. But let me again say a big well done to Afrexim and to Professor Oke Orama. And I would like us to clap for this man. He's a visionary. He has helped, he and his team have helped to support all of us in the private sector. Private sector don't do well on their own. You do well when you have the firepower to do what you need to do. And Oke and his team are doing just that. Thank you.
We're moving now just to the final point from each of our esteemed panelists.
I wanted to say something.
Yes.
Because it's important. So thank you very much, Tony. I'm sure our colleagues who deserve all these accolades here, or they will hear you when they listen to this recording. I wanted to add a few things because you see, one of the things that are happening on the continent is our people, our youth, beginning to think that they have arrived. They compare themselves to the youth in developed economies. And when they are, some of them, when they are in certain jobs or even when they are running their business, you know, the first thing they get is to say, oh, they take the mantra of what the same people, the people of their ilk in more developed parts of the world, you know, what they say and the way they live their life without recognizing that they are different. So you hear this issue of work-life balance, and I want to address it because it's always an issue. The whole work-life balance. But they forget that the poor person in the village who has not eaten, who could be in the farm from morning till late in the night and still only be able to just eat one meal, also has the right to work-life balance. They do not ask themselves the question, and when the people who are fighting for the political independence, when they were fighting for it, when they were in the bush fighting for political independence. They asked whether they had a timer, and they would say by 5 o'clock, we stop and go and rest for the work-life balance, and we start at 9 a.m. Whether that was what gave all of us the freedom we have today. So, as we now fight, do the economic freedom, which is in the hands of the youth, because it was the youth that literally fought for the political freedom we have. I think we need to tell our youth that they do not have to take hook, line, and sinker anything that they see. Any information that comes to them, they have to process in the light of their own circumstances. Because that is how the serious people deal with their problems and emerge better and stronger. Maybe in 50 years, if we do well, our children, grandchildren, 50, 60 years, can start talking of work-life balance. I don't think ourselves and the youth now will be talking about that. That does not mean we should not have rest, take time off, but that should not be a primary preoccupation. I thought I should add this.
And Excellence, thank you so much for those valuable words. I think now we can move to those closing comments. And Your Excellency, I'm going to end with you, President Rama. So I'm first of all going to ask Ahmed and Tony, and I will get His Excellency President Benedict Orama of Afreximbank to close our session. Now we're talking about inspiring the youth. We're talking about giving them visibility into your worlds because you are the leaders of today. So I thought long and hard about this. How do we best present this conversation as a lesson to young people? And there was only one way that I thought I could do that. And that is to ask you to give us insight into what you are saying in your boardrooms as you lead your companies, and of course, Afreximbank, so we'll come to you at the end, as you lead your companies through a very challenging environment. We hopefully are at the tail end of COVID-19. We have a global crisis in the form of Russia-Ukraine. Inflation is at all-time highs. Food, fuel prices, obviously reacting and increasing and fueling inflation. I want to know right now how you are managing your boardroom, what you are saying to your teams on the ground as we face this complex world. Because there's a bright future, but we need to navigate some tough times. So if you can give us that insight, Ahmed, what are you saying to your board? What are you saying to your management teams? And what can you share with young people about your leadership?
Thank you. I'm just saying that even if really it's tough times worldwide and regionally and even sometime, but there is always opportunities, and how it really would change and how we transfer this tough times to opportunity for our countries, our companies, and for our people. And really our main target, as a company, we are around 25,000 personnel or employees working worldwide. Our main target is really to have better future for each person in the company and the society around us, to have better knowledge and training, to give them visibility of the future, and at the same time to focus a lot on the young people and young generation. Me, by example, I'm 60 years old. So our main target is really how to establish and to put very clear idea for the future, especially for the young. As example, we recruit every year 10% of the total group number fresh graduate. and we insist that each person in the company have around a number of fresh graduates to train them for 6 months and how to transfer the knowledge to them. And all our training and all our knowledge is focused on them. And this is not only for Egypt, this is for Tanzania, for Ethiopia, for Sudan, for Nigeria, for all the countries. Especially that in all the countries, we tell to our guys, 95% of the employees in each country to be local, and at least 70% to be fresh graduate, to be the engine for the future. So I believe without this, countries die and companies also dies. Because these are the engine, these are the brains. Really, I'm telling you something. We recruit young guys, young generation to teach us what to do for the future. This is what we plan. Thank you.
We need the young generation to teach us what to do for the future. Tony, insight into your boardroom, sir, and your leadership style.
So, I say to my colleagues and people I work with that first, tough times don't last. 2, that only tough people last. 3, that necessity is the mother of invention. 4, that we are long-term players. And 5, that we are trying to build intergenerational business that is committed to improving lives and transforming our continent. And unless and until we achieve this broad objective or purpose, that we cannot sleep. And so we should see in the journey, entrepreneurship journey is not a linear journey. You have up and down, but when you plot it at the end of the day, you see an upward and progressive movement. I tell them that's what counts. So in business, we make successes, we have challenges. And what the world is going through today is either the issue of inflation or interest rate hike or the food insecurity issue challenge, or in some regions of the world, like in Africa, some part of Africa, insecurity. It will not last, and we cannot be deterred or stopped because of that. So let's keep the hope alive, and that has helped us. When I engage with young African entrepreneurs, because that's my passion a lot, because today's Tony Elumelu was once a youth at some point, and I know my own life story that there's a whole lot of luck in being what I am today. And so I try to give them also the same encouragement. In fact, Professor Rama's intervention today, his first one, where he spoke about hard work, discipline, integrity, and dream. And this second one, where he talked about work-life balance and some of the, I say to my people, there's a book, The Outliers. We need to combine hard work with this new mantra of working smart. Let's work smart, let's work hard, let's apply intellect, let's adopt technology, everything, but let's know that to live a better future, to be successful, and not to be successful, you need to make sacrifices. And so when people just want to leapfrog without making sacrifices, I think they're missing a critical component and part of their growth story. So I say to young ones, be ambitious, dream dreams, and just baby steps. Let's take this one step at a time. But at times, people want to just jump. You don't. All of us, we started small, and then you grow cautiously and cautiously and cautiously, guided by certain principles, some of which Professor Rama has shared here: hard work, discipline, making sacrifices, and most importantly, thinking long term, that whatever it is, the hiccups we have, they will keep coming in business, but they should not deter young people. Young people should know that all of us, wherever we are today, we've had our own taste, and we continue to have it. Just that maybe the proportion might be different. And then for African business leaders and entrepreneurs, I encourage all of us, let's tell our stories, let's spend time to inspire young ones, because that actually is our jewel, and that is our future, and that is the greatest asset as a continent that we have. Thank you.
Let's spend time inspiring young ones. Tony Elumelu, you do that well, sir. And Your Excellency, President Rama, we're coming to almost the close of the second day of the 29th Afreximbank annual meetings. Final word to you on this conversation and insight into your hope for the future, your hope in managing this difficult time. In fact, we want to hear a little bit about your leadership to your teams through what you are saying in your boardroom. So, what are you saying to your teams today in terms of leadership?
Well, in terms of the crisis, no, Afreximbank was born out of crisis. It's a market failure bank. So when market fails, we thrive. And we have proven it right from the beginning. I'm pleased that our pioneer president is here. My predecessor, who was the second, is around but couldn't join us this evening. So all through, we've had this episodic crisis. The only difference is that they are becoming more and more frequent. So what does that mean? It means that everybody in our team now knows we have a toolkit for crisis. So when it happens, they know what we need to do. So it makes the job easier. Making that job easier means that what I then ask is, so what is our response to this crisis? Because everybody looks up to us. We are not a commercial bank that will say, oh, no, this is too risky, we will run away. No, this is the time to go in. We just have to have the courage and the trust in our people, because that's what matters, so that we can take the risk that we would not normally take. But because we have history to show that our people never failed us, so we've taken that trust for granted. So we've used our skills to make sure we have the liquidity, to make sure we have the structuring skills to be able to put facilities in place to respond to the crisis. What that has done to us is that the bank grows fastest in terms of crisis. And this time around, that's what everybody is doing. You see that when the COVID-19 hit, in a matter of 2 weeks, we put in place a facility. We were the first to announce an intervention facility. With Ukraine, I think we were also the first. That was because we had something we could pull from and just adapt to the circumstances. But I must also take this opportunity to thank them, our team, for being committed Africans first and strong and committed Afreximbank bankers who work hard every day. Very innovative, bring ideas that we deploy. And also to thank all our shareholders, the African government, who have been extremely supportive whenever we go to them. They've always responded, even when they are in big difficulties. And finally, I would say we need entrepreneurs in Africa. Factors of production, labor and capital. Africa has abundant supply of labor. We need capital. It's entrepreneurs that can mobilize capital. It's entrepreneurs that can best allocate them most efficiently. It's entrepreneurs that can take risk. These are the ingredients that can bring growth and development. And for us at Afreximbank, I think what we are focusing our mind as we look beyond the crisis is to make sure we grow the entrepreneurs that we help drive the, uh, intra-regional trade, intra-regional investments. And that's why we are so proud of the Afro-capitalists. Some of them are here for being the role models that those who look up to them can follow, so that we can have an abundance of entrepreneurs. It's only when we do that we are able to use the private sector to drive our economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think very, very well said. And of course, let's celebrate our Afri-capitalists, but thank you for all the insight that you have given us into your leadership style. I think we can all feel that Africa is in very safe hands. Our youth, the next generation, are in very safe hands with this caliber of leadership. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Mark Edo, we're handing over to you, but one more round of applause for our esteemed panel. Ahmed Al-Swedi, President Benedicto Rama, Tony Alumelu, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you, Bronwyn Nielsen. Give her a round of applause, please, Bronwyn Nielsen. A little pop question for you here. We've come to close to the end of what's been a very full day, but we have one last thing for you. I'm going to ask my young men here, once they've exited, to bring the table up. We have a table. Why am I bringing a table? Well, okay, I'll ask you a question. What is the what do you think is the #1 bank in Burkina Faso in asset size? Who knows? Anyone? In asset size? Burkina Faso. Anyone? What you said? You said Chorus Bank. If I had a prize, I would give it to you. You're absolutely right, Chorus Bank it is. And the reason why I'm telling you that, is because we're about to sign an MOU between Afreximbank and Chorus Bank, which you will now witness right now. So if I could ask the President, sir, and everyone just to exit stage left, is it? Exit stage left. But I do need you, actually. I'm going to pull you aside so you don't have to come back off the stage again. So, President, what we're going to do here is we're going to sign an MOU with Chorus Bank. And this MOU has the objective to facilitate collaboration between the two institutions so you can harmonize your efforts for the promotion of trade and economic development. Very important to do that with Chorus Bank. But of course, you need a signatory from Chorus Bank, don't you? You're going to sign for Afreximbank, and to sign for Chorus Bank, I'd like you to welcome, put your hands together, I know it's been a long day, Mr. Idrissa Nasser, the Chief Executive Officer of Chorus Bank. So, gentlemen, I said Chorus Bank was the #1 as they're setting up there. We need one more chair, please. One more chair. In fact, you know what? I'm going to take it upon myself. You see, that's it. That's how. And you come and take a seat. If the mountain doesn't come to Moses, Moses has to go to the mountain. Yes, exactly. Take a seat, gentlemen. So as they sign here, let me tell you a little bit more about Chorus Bank. Chorus Bank International, as I said, is the #1 bank in Burkina Faso in asset size, $2.1 billion US. That's the size. In addition to retail and corporate banking activities, Chorus Bank International has given itself the mission of developing SMEs and SMIs and supporting their leaders on all markets they have a presence. In 10 years, the Chorus Group has continued to extend its tentacles into West Africa. It's in Burkina Faso, Benin, Mali, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Togo. The vision of making it the bank otherwise everywhere it operates. So it makes it a good partner, a good Pan-African partner of choice for Afreximbank. Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing the signing. As they stand and exchange the documents, give them a round of applause. The MOU with Chorus Bank and Afreximbank is complete. Congratulations, gentlemen. Thank you to the CEO of Coris Bank and President Orama for that, because that concludes. Oh, you want to say a word? Of course.
No, thank you, Mark. Let me take the opportunity to congratulate and thank our brother Nasser, the founder and chair of Coris Bank, for giving us the privilege of signing this MOU. Coris Bank is a bank that started a few years ago from the dream of one man. But the dint of hard work, the kind of things we were just discussing a few minutes ago, he has grown the bank into a regional powerhouse, operating in multiple countries across West Africa, with plans to even expand further. It is the kind of institution that will support the AFCFTA. It is the kind of institution that will make it possible for trade to be financed within Africa, for payments to be made within Africa, for entrepreneurs to be supported within Africa. It is a bank that Afreximbank is truly proud to work and partner with. So I want to take the opportunity to thank him and assure him of our continued partnership and support as we build on this relationship. Thank you very much, Nasser.
Thank you, Chairman. With your permission, I will speak in French. Je voudrais remercier le président Orama et l'ensemble de son équipe pour ce soutien important qu'ils viennent d'accorder à notre groupe. Il faut savoir que Coris Bank International est un groupe bancaire qui est né il y a de cela 14 ans, en 2008. En 2008, nous avons commencé avec un capital de 3 millions de dollars. Nous avons aujourd'hui un total balance sheet de 9 milliards de dollars. Donc, c'est une institution qui est aujourd'hui dans 9 pays et qui a pour leitmotiv le financement des petites et moyennes entreprises.